Good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is August 29th, 2024, and this is case DCI 2023-00049. It's a request to the RPD zoning district in the South Fort Myers community planning area. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you can please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth? Yes. Thank you. So the way that we're going to proceed this morning is first we're going to hear from the applicant. They're going to present their case and call any witnesses that they may have in support of their request. Following that, we'll hear from the county staff. They're going to go over their review and recommendation in this case. They are recommending approval with conditions and deviations. Following their presentation, that's when I'll call up the cards that I have in the order that I have them. There is only one opportunity to speak, so I would encourage you to take notes as we go through things this morning to make the most of your time at the podium. There is no time limitation in this forum, but if you intend to speak at the board, there is a board time limitation that you'll have there. And if you want to speak at the board hearing, you must speak at the hearing today. And if you have questions, please know that the applicant and the staff and I will be making notes of those, but they probably will not be addressed at the time that you're asking them. Rather, we'll take note of it, and then when we come back to the rebuttal, that is when the applicant and the staff will address the questions that you've asked. But please do ask whatever questions you have. When we get to the rebuttal, again, we'll have the applicant and the staff present their concluding comments, and then we will conclude for today. As I said, I will be making a recommendation to the board on this case, so if you filled out a card, even if you don't intend to speak, you will receive a copy of the recommendation when it's released, as well as a notice of the board hearing date. So those are the extent of my comments. We can begin. Did staff have the notice of publication to present?
Yes, I do. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
Of course. So this will be staff report 2. This is just the notice of publication to show that it was properly noticed, and staff report is the staff exhibit 1. And I'm ready for the applicant when you're ready to begin.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Megan Strayhorn. I'm an attorney with Strayhorn, Persons, Mullica, and Fisher here on behalf of the applicant. Would you like our packet of exhibits?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is the presentation for today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that will be applicant exhibit 1. I did receive 2 48-hour letters on this case. So the first was applicant exhibit A and the second was applicant exhibit B. Thank you.
First, I will introduce members of our team. We have the applicant. We have Joel Mize and Cooper Reese with Flournoy Development Group. As far as our expert witnesses, we have Fred Drobdalik, certified planner from RVI Planning. We have myself, but also Ted Treesh with TR Transportation, and Elizabeth Fountain, an engineer from JR Evans. We would ask that all have presented before you and have been previously deemed expert witnesses, so we ask them to be deemed experts today.
Yes, thank you.
This is a rezoning request, requesting to rezone a mobile home, MHC2, to a residential plan development to allow for 391 multifamily dwelling units. This number does include the base density as well as some bonus density. You will hear us discussing the bonus density, but just for the record, the bonus density is really done through an administrative, but we're using this to be transparent and to show the entire development. The maximum height would be 60 feet. This comes on the heels of a completed comprehensive plan amendment. So the property went from central urban is now intensive development. So the comprehensive plan does permit up to 22 dwelling units. That's 14 dwelling units for the base, as well as the 8 for bonus density per acre. As far as site location, this site is located on the southwest corner of Old Gladiolus Drive in US 41. It is just south of the Lowe's and the major arterial intersection of 6 Mile and 41. It is quarter mile from Lakes Park. Across 41 is the Walmart shopping center and largely commercial uses to the east. There is some residential on the west and south. Oh, my apologies. So this site was a mobile home park. It had 132 mobile homes, and like many other mobile home communities in our community, it met its demise as the result of Hurricane Ian due to the detrimental flooding on site. So those mobile homes have been moved. Flournoy Development is under contract to purchase the property. And usually what's interesting is this mobile home park was individually owned lots. And moving from an individually owned lot on can be very tumultuous and difficult. But fortunately, in this situation, the movement is amicable. The owners are ready to move on, and in the future, this will be, assuming it is approved, will be an infill project with high-density multifamily residential, and it'll be built up to meet.
On that point for 1 second.
Yes.
So the 132 lots, so they each individually have agreed to the sale, and it looked to be that the legal description included all of those 132 lots and the Phillips Creek portion along the south. Is that also part of the property boundary?
Yes.
Okay. And
So
then,
there's a little on that southern portion.
and you're seeking to dissolve essentially the corporation or the condominium. I don't know what status that is in, but there would be unified ownership moving forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So once this all gets approved, all of the lots would be then combined through the property appraiser moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And in the future, we hope for this to be a multifamily residential development that will be built up to base flood elevation and built up to withstand and be resilient in any future storms. Although no community meeting is required for the South Fort Myers, we did go ahead and attempt to have one. So mailers were sent out. This letter was sent out. End of November, the meeting was scheduled for beginning December, trying to work around the holidays and in season and trying to get as many people as possible. However, no one attended the meeting, and up to recently, we have not heard any opposition.
And were those letters, were they sent, I think the record said just to the 6 landowners to the south? Was there any outreach effort to the properties to the west?
I believe the properties to the west are mainly apartment buildings, so I think that there was contact made with the management company, but then I'll turn this over to Mr. Dropdelic.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I've been asked and warned twice to talk slow this morning, so I will do my best to not tire out the court reporter. I get on a roll. I apologize ahead of time, but I'll do my best. Just yell at me. All right. All right, so let's go over the land use analysis, and we'll walk through this project with some of the details. I know that as we went through the comp plan amendment, it can be confusing, and we did bring up some of the site plan in order to give context to the approval for that, but you know, they can't really consider that when they're approving the land use change, and it can be confusing to the public because it's just an open envelope when we're approving a comp plan amendment. So now we can get into the details and really talk through the site plan and what we are trying to accomplish. So the one important piece of this is the surrounding land uses. So when Flournoy first came to us and talked about this project, we thought through, well, this is in coastal high hazard, so how's this gonna work? There's comp plan policies that allow for bonus density and other types of uses, or those types of uses in coastal high hazard, but there's a lot of specifications for that, and it has to be site built affordable. And then we also had to look at, is this the proper place for that? Is this a proper infill development? Is it around shopping centers? Is it around employment centers? And I think we can show with this in the next slide that this is a pretty good location for this. One part of it is that it wasn't a good location for a mobile home park as it was shown. It was built years ago before a lot of the flood requirements were there, so it's low lying, and if you do your site visit, you'll see that all the other properties around it are built up to a pretty high degree, and there's actually concrete slopes on the back side of the car wash that go into this piece of property.
That explains that. I did a site visit yesterday, and it was still wet in the middle before the rain came, and I don't recall it raining the day before. So I appreciate that clarification. That was one of my questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be raised, a substantial amount, and we're working through that as part of a conditional letter of map revision, but also the development order. I mean, bringing it up to flood standards is going to be an important piece of this for the resiliency and the sustainable development. As far as the surrounding car washes, I mean, we're surrounded by similar uses for the most part. The only different use is to the south in that Henry Creek subdivision. There, I think it's Phillips Court is the cul-de-sac to the south where there's the larger single-family homes across Phillips Creek. So outside of that, it's against a budding 41. There's a little sliver there in the corner that connects to 41, and we'll talk about that. With the car wash just to the north, it's the Infinity dealership. When you go back there, you'll see that the Infinity dealership enjoys using this as some of their parking and repairing and changing tires out on the street. It's kind of crazy. But for the most part, then this corridor is an interesting corridor, and we think it fits that shopping center, employment center type of area. It's attached to a ton of retail, attached to multi-use paths on 41, and other uses that are, I think, really favorable for a higher density development. So let's go into that, and we'll go into this several times too, but there's no environmentally sensitive areas on site. This was developed, I mean, the staff report points out, this was developed before a lot of those codes, so it was fully developed, so there's no wetlands on site, but obviously there's needs to be raised, need to be raised for the new development. So let's go into this next piece. This is actually a graphic that we produced for Flournoy to try to figure out their vision for the property. And we don't have to go through all this individually, but this just gives a good regional understanding of what's happening along 41, what's happening along 6 Mile Cypress. Tons of development here that has either been here for quite a while or even some of it new with Pop Stroke and some of the other stuff that has gone up close to here. One of the great things, I mean, this Lakes Park, which I know most people really like Lakes Park, what a great regional park it is. It's within that walk shed. We'd love to see sidewalks along the entire Old Gladiolus. We'll put in ours and love to see that connect to Lakes Park so you can have that. The road isn't a lot of traffic on it, so people can use that road to get over there, but I'd love to see sidewalk connection to Lakes Park, but it is within that walk shed, that quarter mile to a half mile right to a regional park. So we believe this is a perfect infill development. Important piece of this was not to only connect to Old Gladiolus, but to connect to that employment center and that transportation network on 41. So we are actively working through a connection, a right in, right out, to connect to US 41 as that secondary access that's required by the Land Development Code for this. It wouldn't be a pass through. It wouldn't be to produce traffic on Old Gladiolus with people trying to get past the intersection at 6 Mile. It would just be a gated, a restricted access just for this development, a right in, right out. So we'll get into that in the site plan. We'll do that next. So another important piece of whether this is appropriate for the higher density residential is the public infrastructure. So with the comp plan policies and other requirements, we're not to, build things where it would require unreasonable extensions of utilities, of other services when it's higher density residential. So the question is everything in place? We have letters of service from Lee County Utilities, who serves the site now, so sewer and water, and they say they have capacity, so that would continue as an active connection. Roadways have adequate capacity, and we'll get into that in a slide and show you the impact that this development has, and we believe it to be negligible, but we'll get into the exact details of that. So with the two connections to Old Gladiolus, obviously in US 41 that connects to two major arterials, and then the intersection at 6 Mile to kind of complete that network. Lee Train has a bus stop within 1/4 mile, so it is actually right there at the car wash that serves 11490 Route 240. It goes to Coconut Point Mall, Bell Tower, Route 140, Merchants Crossing, and Bell Tower. So this is well connected for bus routes, which is, and they actually run at decent intervals. So this is it's actually a genuinely useful Lee Tran route for commuters. US 41 Proposed access is shared use path on the west side of US 41, so this connects directly to a shared use path that runs along this entirety and connects to the one on 6 Mile, to Gladiolus, and all the way northeast and west. So this is fully connected as far as alternative walkways and multi-use path to the region. Site is, yeah, the site entrance obviously on Old Gladiolus Drive. Yeah, I guess we're doing 1/4 mile of the shared path on Gladiolus Drive in Lakes Regional Park, and then Fire Station 63 is within 1 mile, and Lee County Sheriff's Substation is within 1 mile as well. And a EMS substation is within service areas, and again, we have letters of availability for all those. We did that for the comp plan amendment, and we have those for the RPD as well. Future land use, that's been the current change to go to intensive development. That was approved recently, so that gives us that change. Then this is the comparison of what that did. So it was in the central urban future land use category. That allowed up to 15 units per acre, including bonus density. So central urban allows 10 units of base density, 5 units of bonus density. Intensive allows up to 22 units per acre, with 14 units of base density and 8 units of bonus density. Because it's in coastal high hazard, those bonus density units have to be site-built affordable, or in this case, we're going to use a mix of site-built affordable and the gray water legislation from the state. So it'd be environmentally sensitive for the entire apartment complex, and some site-built affordable that'll be under the requirements of Lee County for the workforce housing level of affordability. It was zoned, currently zoned MHC2. We don't believe this zoning is compatible with the current coastal high hazard area. And so I think an appropriate rezoning is to an RPD. So now we'll just determine if this is the appropriate rezoning that we feel works. We do feel this one works and is consistent with the LDC and the comp plan in every way. Both the central urban future land use category and intensive development future land use category encourage uses that best serve the local residents' commuter traffic. So they both included dense multifamily development, particularly where urban services are present and is near employment centers. So overall, the move from central urban to intensive really allowed just for that affordable part to be built, and for sustainable development to be built. I mean, these units, to raise the land to build these kind of this apartment complex, emergency preparedness plans, everything else that needs to come along with it, is not an inexpensive build. So there is the extra units have really allowed for that room on the property, and for this to really be able to be built, because at the end of the day, economically, it has to work for the numbers to work, and those extra units really made that happen and allowed for it to be the site-built affordable, and that use of the gray water legislation, which is environmentally a bonus. Yeah, current zoning, like I said, MHC2. It was a flood-prone area, and this will have to be built up to the current flood storm regulations. So there's the current and proposed MHC2 and the proposed to an RPD. All right, so now let's get into the site plan a little bit. So what we propose is a entrance off of Old Gladiolus, actually right here, and the right in, right out on US 41. So that would be the 2 entrances as required by the LDC. It's a four building complex. We request a height of 5 stories up to 60 feet. We have a development order in that is lower than that. It's only 4 stories, but we want to maintain that flexibility. But right now, we're only going to be going to 4 stories. Parking surrounding it, obviously, but we pushed everything as north as we could to try to give, well, not try to give, I mean, we needed to have the 50-foot natural waterway buffer. So I do have a slide that shows where the mobile homes were before. And now with Phillips Creek there, we're required to have a 50-foot natural waterway buffer. We do intrude a little bit into the south end of that, and southeast end of that, and that's what we have a deviation for, just for that little bit of parking to intrude into the 50-foot natural waterway buffer. That does come with planning requirements. We fully intend to meet all the planning requirements. It was just that corner in the layout to make this site really work for the units that we had. Some recreation there for the users. So, you know, on the north side, we have a fair setback that's at least the 50 feet. That's what that dotted line is, plus additional area and green space in the back. Central Lake, walkways and things around it. The vision that we're going for here is going to be a very nice development. And we think this layout's favorable. We do have a line of sight to show you as well, so that we can see how that affects the properties to the south, because that is really the main concern. Whether we're not unconcerned about these, but this is really like use, where this is the single family use. And you pointed out that we've worked on surveying so much on this to try to figure out why does it have the property line includes the central line through Phillips Creek. That is accurate and that is right. It does include that. South of there, it's put in in a separate piece of separate parcels, all the south of there, but it does include it. So that was part of what we had to get into with, and then how do we calculate open space? That doesn't count, and it actually, since it's all water and we can't store anything there, it actually kind of hurts our 40% at some point. So staff was great working with us there to give us or to agree to a deviation there, and then try to improve water quality by doing it. So in order to have only 37.5% of open space over on the built site, then we're going to do extra water quality with littoral plantings and things along the shoreline of Phillips Creek to try to offset that. We'll still be overall for the entire site, including that, we'll be over the 40%, but that gives us some flexibility on site design. But I think we're going to be fine. But we really appreciate staff working with that, and the additional condition for water quality is a win for everybody.
Before you leave the master concept, is it correct that the clubhouse is connected to the northwestern building?
Yeah, it would be underneath the some of the units there. Yeah. Yeah, and there'll be amenity area here. I don't know if I don't think I have the size quite accurate according to the development order, but amenity area in the back and pool area, and then the clubhouse underneath some of the units.
And you said it will be gated, is the intent?
Yeah, this property is going to be gated, yes.
Thank you.
All right, I have this one just to show the open space on site as is. There isn't a whole lot to show. We do have a cross section of the natural waterway buffer and how that's going to be constructed. So this was just one that adds a little bit of color to it, just for reference for your sake, to show where the pavement and the drive aisles and everything are in a little more clarity. So then we did line of sight study, because we want to see how does this affect those single family homes. What are they going to see at the end of the day? You can see that it's on the overlay prior to the storm, so you can see where the mobile homes were, and then where our parking and where all of our parking and where the natural waterways and things are that we proposed. So the setbacks are a lot more significant, at least with buildings, and then a little more open green space rather than the mobile homes there. So those are the two views that we show. Here's the result. These are showing 5-story buildings on here. So if they were standing in their backyard and looking north, this is what they would see. We are going to have some of these buffers here, so it would hide a decent amount, but I think you'd be able to see the top of the buildings for sure, especially through some of the trees. If the trees grow up thick and lush over time, you'll see less and less of that. And then the distance is about between 400 and 550 feet away from the closest building. So we should be able to hide the cars very well, and then you'll see the tops of buildings about 500 feet away. This was the former, so this was just a piece of my piece of our narrative that just showed where the mobile home formerly were, some of the docks along Phillips Creek. So those are all removed or in the process of removal. There are a few units left, but almost everything down there is removed. Sound like you did a site visit, so you can see that almost everything's cleared out. So yeah, they were, some of them were a decent amount of distance away. Some of them were not. Some of them were right down on Phillips Creek. So the 50-foot line, that's an estimated line that I showed there, but I think it's pretty accurate to show where the new natural waterway buffer is. And obviously then we'll be really closer to here on our on our parking on some of that. So there's a lot more green space than there was.
And those docks will be removed?
Hmm?
The docks will be removed?
Yeah, and we are proposing one new dock to go in that would be kind of a kayak launch or something that's amenity for the apartment, for the apartment complex. So, but all the other existing ones will be removed, and then a new one will be constructed that'll meet current code. We met with Natural Resources a number of times to make sure that we had the, the area of that correct, and would there be complications or what we would need to do to get that approved, and so we included that in the RPD. So three deviations were requested. One was denied. One was in the 48-hour letter that I presented an argument for, and I'll discuss that. But we're really overall in agreement with the staff report. We're in agreement with the recommendations. It's almost part of it's just philosophical changes I feel need to be done with the LDC on multifamily developments. But I do think there's a path that if you'd want to approve some deviation, I believe there's a path for it. But I'll go through the discussion. But we're not gonna argue about that for too long. But I did want to put it on the record. So deviation 1 is for the waterway. That's the one I talked about where we're going to intrude in that little south corner with the parking lot a little bit, but we have to, and then they set the condition that we still have to meet the planting requirements and enhance it a little bit with the littoral plantings. And then deviation 3 is for the 40% open space, where the staff took into consideration the fact that some of our land area is Phillips Creek, and allowed us a deviation for 2.5% less required on the upland portion of our property. And then as a condition of that, that was part of the littoral plantings to offset or to help with water quality. So the denial was for deviation number 2. So in these multifamily developments, of course, there were 2 units per, 2 parking spaces per unit. Plus 10% for guest parking. So we're at 2.2 per unit. Then we don't have, I know consultants here have done some traffic study or some studies on light communities, what's the required parking for multifamily, what's the market demand. And it's less than 2.2, but we're not here to argue that. It is what it is. And this is still, even though this is an urban area or more urban area and it's an infill area, this is still, a lot of the county is still very suburban, and people drive everywhere because you really have to, unless you're taking transit or trying to get somewhere with alternative transportation, you are driving. So we understand that, and we're not trying to argue that. Someday we would love to argue that, but we're not going to argue that today. The part that we're arguing is that it's a residential development, and the 2.2 is fine. That produces a lot of parking. For our units, we're almost at 850 to 900 spaces. It's a lot of pavement and a lot of parking. But they also then take, so say we're having a 10,000 square foot clubhouse that is for private use only for the residents, that would have, the pool, amenity center, workout room, yoga place, or those kind of exercise rooms that where you could hold classes, stuff like that. But it's all for the residents internally, and this isn't like a maybe a single-family development that would have extra rooms that are being rented out, and all the relatives and families would be invited to things and to come in and use the parking, or a golf community that would that guests would be coming to fill the foursome and filling up a parking lot. This is for private use, and all the apartments are within that quarter mile or much less in order to get to the clubhouse. And so I think we would find most of the people would just be walking to the clubhouse for its use. Yet it's parked like it's a commercial like that 10,000 square feet is a commercial use separate from everything else. So the 10,000 square foot, it would require 45 more parking spaces. We believe those are mostly covered by the parking that's already there, especially since this is for private use only by the current tenants. So we believe we're asking for a 37% reduction, 15 spaces, just for that use, not for the apartment required spaces. Just 15 less spaces for the clubhouse use. So instead of the current ratio that's required, we'd be down to 2.5 spaces per 1,000 for that clubhouse. So we're still parking 25 to 30 spaces for that clubhouse, which would take care of people that are trying to lease, or the office staff, or any other staffing, and just a little bit of relief there. I think the path, I don't know that we feel like we have a path for the 37.5% the way the code stands now. I do feel like if this is going to be counted as a commercial component as far as parking that's required to it, that maybe it's parked as a non-residential use, that then gives us the administrative wherewithal to be able to approve at least a 10% reduction in that parking, because it's next to transit, it's next to the multi-use pass. We didn't do traffic study, but those two other components of the land development code in 34-2020C allow for that 5% reduction for if you meet each of those criteria. I think that's a path for some reduction, but again, I just wanted to put that on the record, what we thought about that, and then we can, staff and everybody else can talk through that. We hope that this is part of the upcoming LDC changes. I've heard inklings of that and rumors that it's at least being thought through. But I know they don't want to complicate that with developments that would be like that would open up the door for these huge reductions, or not counting those clubhouses towards anything, and then start to have parking problems that it's operational problem for the owner and it's operational problem for the management company, but we also understand that staff hears about it and that it makes its way up politically sometimes very well, and that is not, it's a headache that nobody needs, and I understand that. So I think it sounds simple the way I'm putting it for this multifamily development that has a clubhouse just for its residents, but to just make a simple statement in the LDC, I know is not simple. You don't want to open the door to the wrong type of either administrative or requested deviation paths for other types of development where they do need that extra parking at the clubhouse. So we understand.
And it is a unique design. That was the point of my question earlier, the fact that the clubhouse is contained within one of the residential buildings, because I would anticipate there's going to be some accessibility for the folks that live in that building so that they can essentially just walk maybe down the hallway. I don't know what that's going to really look like. Is there going to be separation? Will it be a standalone building? I think you said that there would be units above it.
I don't know offhand, but we do have the management company here. They could answer at least the designs that they know of in their head now. I know they're working through development order and still working through that process, but the development order is in, and they could answer some of those. They could answer that question if you want them to come up and do that.
At the appropriate time. I'd like to hear from staff as well. It's an issue, obviously, that needs to be addressed, but it is unique because I personally haven't seen a site plan that shows a clubhouse contained within a unit like that. And so if that is warranting some kind of special consideration, I'm just curious. And I don't know with the study that you spoke about, if there was a similar community that they looked at when they were looking at the demand for the recreational facilities that are on site. Typically, as you said, it's a standalone clubhouse that's hosting events, and it gets a lot of traction, golf carts, that kind of thing.
And it could be a large development where if people are, some of these developments, you could be 2 miles away, and some of them aren't biking to they're driving their own cars to that,
Right.
Yep.
It's a unique project, it seems, from that perspective, but we can talk about it after staff.
All right. So bonus density compliance. So there is a land development code, section 2-146B that lays out the criteria for approval of bonus density. There's the 4 criteria. We agree with staff on this analysis. I think I used some of their language on this as well. So the first one is additional traffic will not be required to travel through areas with significant lower densities. All the properties to the west to Gladiolus, along Old Gladiolus, are multifamily, so we think it's probably like development. This one's a little more dense than that, but it's still all multifamily use. So we don't believe, it's not traveling through any single-family areas that are of different use, so we think it meets that criteria. And then with the access on US 40 or 41 will dissipate some of that traffic, so the overall additional impact from the original mobile home that didn't have access to 41 to now dissipating some of that. I think a lot of people will use that direct access on the 41. If they're going south, I mean, it's a no-brainer, I think.
Do you have a status update on that? Because that is
do.
a concern if you don't, to be pushing the amount of traffic that you otherwise would be pushing solely onto Old Gladiolus.
Yeah.
I think that's a problematic prong for you to reach for the bonus density component, not just the multifamily
Yeah.
project itself, but do you have any information on where that stands with FDOT?
I will, as soon as I'm done with my part, then Ted Treesh will speak with that. He has an update on it. We've been with FDOT, we've got an REI letter, we've got our responses. I don't know if we'll be responsive once to that, but we're optimistic that it is going to get done, but we're working through the checklist of FDOT, and Ted can opine on the extensive regional study that he's being required to do to show that there's not, detrimental impacts on the US 41. So I'll allow him to give the further details. That was an important component and a question that obviously we were asked by the commissioners and the LPA as well. That's an important component to this, is to get that approved. Not only we didn't ask for a deviation for no secondary access for a residential development, but also for exactly what you're saying, is not load all that traffic onto Old Gladiolus. And that connection, in several ways, and that connection into the regional network, the transportation network, the bike, the transit network, all that's important with that access point. Existing committed public facilities are not overwhelmed that a density increase would be contrary to the overall public interest. This is where we really feel this property, this is the right place for this. Not only the sustainable development environmentally, which is number 3, but all the public infrastructure is in place. This is the perfect place for that, and there's no updates or upgrades that need to happen for us to meet the services that are needed for this property. The storm shelters or other appropriate mitigation is provided if development is located within coastal high hazard areas. So this is in the coastal high hazard area. I'll have Elizabeth Fountain go through that in a slide as well. So we are going to be required to not only meet FEMA flood elevation designation, so it'll increase the resiliency with the new structures, but we're also going to have the emergency preparedness plan that's going to have to be monitored, and a coastal high hazard hurricane risk assessment report that's been done by them as well, and an ongoing water quality management plan. So those things are in the draft form already in the RPD in your packet, but those will have to be maintained in perpetuity as well. And we can talk about evacuation times and those kind of things as well in the next couple slides. And resulting development will be compatible with existing and planned surrounding land uses. So the only part that we think could have a compatibility issue is the properties across Phillips Creek. We tried to design the site in every way to mitigate that, provide more green space along Phillips Creek, improve the water quality and the shoreline there, and set the buildings back as far as we could, and have a reasonable height to those buildings, not trying to go too tall that's out of character for the area. So we believe it meets the criteria for the bonus density compliance. And the LDC compliance, I won't go through each one of these. We believe we meet this. The staff did a great job as well. Our narrative's in here on each one of these that's broken down with paragraphs on each one of these criteria. We believe we meet all these, and I think I already hit on every one of them as we went through this, between urban services, environmentally critical sensitive areas, the expected impacts on transportation we'll hit on, sufficient access to support the development, compatible with existing and surrounding land uses, and the other LDC regulations we believe we are in line with on this request. So now that's when we'll go into the life safety analysis, and I'm going to turn this over. So far, as part of your plan, we have the water quality management plan, we have emergency preparedness plan in draft form, and then coastal high hazard hurricane risk assessment reports. and those were done by J.R. Evans, and Elizabeth Fountain is here to talk about those. So we'll let her jump up here. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Elizabeth Fountain with J.R. Evans Engineering, and I've been qualified previously as an expert witness. So we did perform an assessment on the coastal high hazard qualification for the site and a risk assessment based on that evaluation. So based on the LEMAP 5A, which was as of November 2021, the area is on the outer perimeter of the coastal high hazard area as defined by the NOAA slosh model, which is really a surge inundation model that provides the worst case scenario, like the worst of worst. So it is, for the evacuation planning purposes, it is in the coastal high hazard area defined by NOAA. Alternatively, I think it's important to understand that based on the new FEMA maps, the area is not in what FEMA defines as their coastal high hazard area, which is typically defined by your designations that are called Zone VE or a Coastal A zone. That's where you've got the high velocity wave action that could cause damage to structures. This property is located well outside of that area. It's in a Zone AE with the base flood elevation of 11, and it's not atypical for properties in this area to be in a Zone AE.
You have a slide on that.
Sure. How do I do?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So this exhibit shows the limits of the FEMA coastal high hazard area, and you can see how it's really located further south, where Hendry Creek gets close to intersecting Estero Bay. So the site is noted by a green box up in the north corner and a star. So another factor we look at is how close the property is to state designated evacuation routes, and it's very close in proximity to US 41, Daniels Parkway, 6 Mile Cypress. So all of those are very close in proximity to the site to provide that convenient evacuation should it be needed. Based on the traffic impact statement that's been prepared by our traffic consultant, we determined that the additional units do not have a significant impact on evacuation times. Basically, it impacts a segment of 41 south of Island Park Road by just 0.3%, based on the adopted roadway capacity. And based on historic documented evacuation behaviors, it's noted that manufactured home properties typically evacuate at a higher rate than apartment building complexes or single-family site-built homes. So it's our evaluation, it's our determination that converting that property from a manufactured home to an apartment complex is going to be beneficial to lessen that evacuation demand.
So was the destruction that was caused by the hurricane wind-related and not flooding? I was under the impression it was flooded.
It was flooded, yes.
Okay, but FEMA is still keeping it outside of their coastal high hazard area?
Yes. It's still in an area, the Zone AE designation, there's still moving water. It's still influenced by the surge. It doesn't have the same amount of wave action, but it's still considered to be rising water.
And the new construction, if it were to go forward, would have to meet the current building codes that are designed
Exact.
to withstand certain hurricane, God forbid, conditions?
Exactly. So the required finished floor for the first habitable space would have to be elevated above FEMA's base flood elevation by at least 1 foot. So they have to be at an elevation of 12. So that gives you an additional resiliency factor to protect those habitable spaces.
So right now, it's essentially a bowl, it seems to be when you look at it. So it will be raised up prior to the construction occurring.
Exactly.
Will that have any offsite effects, or is that something someone else will address for the stormwater?
So that's being we're doing the calculations and the analysis to demonstrate that we're not going to have any adverse impacts to adjacent properties. The project's going through the Lee County Development Review process and through South Florida Water Management District review, and both of those agencies will ask questions about adverse impacts to adjacent properties from a flooding perspective. So
Is the DO that's been, does it match this MCP absent the additional units? Is that the only difference?
Substantially, yeah.
substantially it does, yes. As Fred mentioned, we have prepared a draft of the emergency preparedness plan that's in accordance with Administrative Code 7-7, the checklist that's required. That plan will be finalized through the development order process and documented and then maintained. And it should be, we recommend that it should be maintained annually to keep up to date with emergency preparedness guidelines and requirements. So I think that completes my presentation, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Treesh for the traffic impacts. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ted Shreesh with TR Transportation Consultants. The traffic study that we submitted was for both the comprehensive plan and the zoning request that's before you this morning. For the zoning, we looked at the 391 multifamily units in the 4-story buildings that are being requested. As indicated that this MCP request access onto US 41 as right-in, right-out, which currently is not available to the property as it exists today. Our analysis showed that we didn't have any significant impacts on the surrounding roadways. Based on Lee County criteria, significant impacts are defined as the project trips exceeding 10% of the level service C volumes on the surrounding roads. So we don't exceed those thresholds, so we don't have a significant impact on the surrounding roadways. There are a couple roadways that are already showing a poor level of service. Those are 6 Mile Cypress as you go east of 41 and US 41 south of 6 Mile Cypress. Those two roadways are currently at a poor level service, but the other roadways, Gladiolus is currently at a level service C, is projected to remain at level service C with the project, and US 41 North is shown at an acceptable level of service. So those will remain with the project. Intersection analysis was conducted pursuant to the administrative code and submitted and reviewed by staff. There's an attachment in the staff report that summarizes the traffic study that we're in agreement with. It summarizes the TIS review as well. There's a Lee Tran bus stop that's immediately outside the project boundary on US 41 that will be available to the residents of this property as well. That'll help reduce the project trips that those residents will be available to use. As indicated by Fred, we are in the permitting process with FDOT as part of the development order for the access onto US 41. FDOT's got a pretty extensive review now. They've changed their permitting process in the last 6 months. So it's quite an extensive analysis that we now have to go through with, even though it is just a right-in, right-out connection. But we are in the middle of that process right now. We're analyzing the intersection of US 41 and Gladiolus, as well as US 41 and Jamaica Bay just to our south as part of this analysis. So I'm currently in that process right now and submitting that sufficiency response back to FDOT this week. We'll get that analysis back to them, but there will be a right turn lane on 41 into the driveway. As Fred indicated, the access is gated into the property, so it won't be a cut through from Old Gladiolus onto 41, so it'll be just for the residents. Residents will have, let me go back to the aerial. Residents will be able to access 41 to be able to go south and come in from the north to be able to access the property, as well as to access Old Gladiolus to Gladiolus, where there's a traffic signal that's opposite the Lakes Park entrance, if you're familiar with that on your site visit. There's also an entrance to the Lowe's. You can get into Lowe's, into the back door to Lowe's as well. at that location. So by creating this additional access onto US 41, it's better serving the residents of this community to give them a better way to get in and out of this property rather than just singular access to Old Gladiolus over to Gladiolus Drive, and better disperse the traffic onto the surrounding roadways.
Was an analysis done if that is not approved from FDOT? Did you look at what the trip generation would result if you had to push it to Old Gladiolus?
No, we haven't done that because we had a pre-app early on in the process and there was no objection from FDOT, and we're in the permitting process, so we don't anticipate them denying the access. It's just a matter of working out the details and the design details, so we don't anticipate that being denied. I mean, it's just working out the design details and the traffic details with FDOT. So.
And there was the proposed condition that required you to stay at 4 stories or above. I assume that's because of the ITE designation for the mid-rise development. Was there any look at what the trip generation does if it changes to a lower?
Yeah, it just changes the trip slightly. ITE in this 11th edition broke out the multifamily into 3 categories: low-rise, mid-rise, and high-rise. There is a slight difference in trip generation characteristics between those 3 different multifamily categories. It's not substantial, in my opinion. The low-rise does generate a few more trips in terms of trip generation, but it won't create any additional off-site improvements. We're still doing the right turn lane on 41 for the entrance. There's no turn lane improvements required on Old Gladiolus at that site entrance. That's a dead-end road. It doesn't have any traffic on it at our entrance. That road doesn't connect to 41, so it might increase the project trip generation by a few percentage points.
Would it get you past the 10%? Is that why?
No.
For it?
No, not at
You would
all.
still retain, even with a low-rise designation, you would not create the significant impact
No.
to meet the standard by the county.
But what we see in these multifamily communities is sometimes we'll have a mix of building heights. Some buildings would be 3 stories, some buildings would be 4 stories. There's some flexibility, so we just didn't want to be hamstrung in terms of what we might be able to do if plans change in the future.
Thank you.
And that's all I had at this time.
Okay, now wrap up and go into the comp plan consistency, and I'll turn it back over to Megan for the final remarks. I believe that's the order. So it's in the intensive future land use development, or intensive development future land use category, which some of the description of that is along major arterial roads. Again, that's the important connection to US 41, and then the service with Old Gladiolus serves Gladiolus and goes to major arterials, suited to accommodate high densities and intensities, mixed-use developments of high-density residential, commercial, limited light industrial. So the high-density residential, this is the right land use category for that. We believe it's well located for an urban infill redevelopment with all urban level services and proximity. Replace the mobile home park that was a risk area for flooding, raises the construction to the current design flood elevations, and so we believe, and we agree with staff, that we're consistent with this LEED plan policy. The two I think really important ones are 5.1.2, 5.1.3. So 5.1.2 directs Lee County to prohibit residential development where physical constraints exist or require the density and design to be adjusted accordingly. So, and this analysis is done very well by staff as well, and we agree with their analysis. For what we saw in there, we want to say that we believe it minimizes hazards to the proposed development. The design will be required to be adjusted according to the consistency with policy 2.2 and the flood zone and the property's flood zone in the Florida Building Code. and we tried to provide increased setbacks to Phillips Creek and improve water quality. So what of the physical constraints that did exist had to do with the coastal high hazard flood area, and we believe we're addressing those that will be consistent. And then we do also believe that because of the new connection to 41, the type of uses that abut us to the east with all the uses along 41, that is a proper and a well-used transition area from intense arterial commercial uses to high-density residential of modern design, and then as you go west to the little lower structures, but still multifamily development. And then, so we're not having a traffic go through a single-family subdivision or anything like that. So we believe that we meet this policy. Staff agrees with us as well. And then a couple of the other ones, the policy 101.1.4, plan amendments to increase density within coastal high hazard areas have to meet one of the following criteria. We believe we'll meet this through number one, but these are the three criteria. But we believe will not result in an out-of-county hurricane evacuation time that exceeds 16 hours for a Category 5 storm event. So we believe we'll meet the policy here and be consistent and comply. And then 101.3.2 that restricts development in the coastal high hazard area to uplands except as needed for provision of public facilities. So the site was developed long ago, before the codes, before South Florida Water Management. There are no wetlands on site according to any of those jurisdictional determinations right now. The site is 19.33 acres, 1.16 of that is in Phillips Creek. So of the 18.17 acres that are left, it's all considered upland as far as those jurisdictions are concerned. And then, as Elizabeth said, by the requirements of those jurisdictions will need to meet that we're not doing off-site impacts, we're controlling our own stormwater, we're not flooding abutting properties, because we'll actually now be raised up above some of those other properties, so we have to fully control that on-site and release as appropriate according to the ERP. So these two policies, policy 101.3.6 and 101.3.7, have to do with the bonus density. So we wanted to put those on there to acknowledge that we're required to do site-built affordable housing in the coastal high hazard area. So in order to be considered for bonus density, that's our only option. We can't contribute to the fund and pay for those units, and we can't use transfer of development units in order to accomplish those units. So site-built affordable it is, above the base units, and also the state requirements or the state statutes that allow us to use some of the gray water as well. Between those two, we meet these policies and are in compliance. So then, I believe I'll just turn this over. We'll go over the final benefits and let Megan sum this up, and we'll have the conclusions, and then we'll be ready to move on. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in summary, allowing this residential plan development to move forward, it will allow the site to be built up to today's standards and make it much more compatible than a mobile home park in the coastal high hazard area. So everything would be elevated, built up to today's elevations, and this also allows for this development to be utilized as an infill development that is very close to the major arterial roadways of 6 Mile Cypress and South Tamiami Trail, along with very connected to Lakes Park Regional Park, as well as employment centers. Staff has recommended approval. That this is not only consistent with the land development code, but also the comprehensive plan. We do ask that you find a recommendation of approving this RPD for the maximum 391 units, maximum 60 feet of height, with the deviations 1, 2, and 3. We are also in agreement with staff's conditions with one caveat. The last sentence in 6 in staff's comments 6B, we just ask that the building, appears to be confused with a development limitation, and that's the one that deals with the ITE and transportation, stating that the building cannot be less than four habitable floors. I even still messed it up. But we just ask that that one sentence be removed, and we're in agreement with the others, but we would still request the deviation to be approved.
Can we get the site plan, the master concept plan back up on the screen, please? And I'm not sure who to direct this to, but can someone walk through the water management system, just so I'm understanding? I understand it's gonna be improved from what it was previously, but there was detail in the record and the staff report about the conveyance system that will be designed. Just to indicate general flow compared to the current conditions. Thank you.
Good morning. Yep.
You can just kind of detail or describe, it talked about sheet flow direction, and I think it's coming from the east side of 41. It said through this property into Phillips Creek, which then empties into essentially a Cerro water base, ultimately. That's
Exactly.
where it's going.
Yes.
But can you describe, if you've got, it sounds like a pending ERP already in, can you just kind of detail what that's going to look like and how, I'm assuming the lake is going to capture some of this and direct it off-site?
Yes. So the designed water management lake is designed to handle all the runoff coming from the new development aspects. It will provide the required water quality treatment area with the state requirements and attenuation for the 25-year 3-day event. We are also ensuring that additional 100-year floodplain encroachment compensation volume is being provided in that pond prior to discharge into Phillips Creek. So the system will be self-contained, meaning all the runoff that's generated from the parking lot, the buildings, any of those surfaces will be collected into a system, transferred into the lake for treatment and storage, and then discharged through a control structure that at a certain prescribed rate into Phillips Creek.
And that's working in tandem with the water quality monitoring condition, because it is an impaired water body, so you've agreed to all of the additional conditions that the county is imposing. Is the district, I assume, also going to be imposing some water quality information through that?
Yes, they have their own state requirements that we have to demonstrate that we're improving or reducing the nutrient loading from pre-condition to post.
And that the project's not
Development.
degrading the current water quality
Exactly.
condition? Okay.
Yes.
So that is being, I just wanted general information, because obviously that's an issue on this property. We know that it floods, and I would not want to approve something that's going to find itself in the same fate. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And then I had a question while we've got this up too, and I'm not, traffic circulation, I don't know if that's a planning question or a traffic question, but it doesn't, thank you. If there's anything with the entrances, are they both going to be utilizing some kind of a roundabout, it looks like? I know the 41, it appears to be as a circular entrance feature. Is that what's contemplated on the old Gladiolus entrance and exit as well? Just to kind of direct the traffic flow, because if you are coming in from 41, I don't know what the distance separation is on this, but it's a very, having driven it yesterday, there's connection points
Yeah.
in quite quick succession, and so I'm just curious if that's.
So you don't want anything that would slow them up, and make them slow
guessing that's why.
unnecessarily to pull into their.
Correct. I'm guessing that's
Yeah.
why it's designed in this fashion, but I just wanted some
Yeah.
clarification on the record.
And some of this was a conceptual design, so as we're going through the development order process, if there's anything like that that doesn't comply, we're going to slow down them, we're going to change that entrance. Obviously, part of the MCP that was done, 6 to 8 months prior to the development order. So the traffic circulation piece is being addressed by development services now, and if that roundabout isn't appropriate, or they find anything like that, then we'll adjust it and change it as needed. So, yeah, I understand that. In fact, that design makes a right and then makes them do a sharp right into a gate. So, yeah, that was, you know, some conceptual design that didn't necessarily trying to meet all that, you know, us planners. So then at the end of the day, the development services will take care of that.
Okay, and the entrance point that's on Old Gladiolus, it's being moved west, but is it still meeting the connection separation from, I assume, because there's not a deviation that's being requested at this point, but what was the cause of moving it farther west?
Further west. Yeah, it was really just the layout to meet parking. It was just a logical layout for the property. The justification is there, and the DOT, you know, agreed that the traffic is so low back there that typically we'd want to align with maybe the Infinity dealership or something across the street. They let that one go because of the low traffic volumes. It's a secondary access for Infinity, and there's no other cross traffic at all. So it was just, that allowed us just the freedom of just the optimum site design to make things flow best. So that was really the justification, was a design feature.
And then the distance that you talked about on this, on the master concept plan, it shows it's 170 feet to the nearest home. The line of sight exhibits that you showed substantially more than that. So I'm curious if you know the actual distance, either from the parking area edge to the closest residence or from the building to the closest residence.
Yeah, from the building to the closest residence is what those numbers were. So the parking,
You meet or exceed that, I believe it's 125 feet that they have to do. They obviously meet that, I'm just curious.
oh, let me see. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Yeah, let me see where we are at. Yeah, this will help me. So, well, here on this side, then we weren't as concerned. There's not the residential area here. So,
Well, it's got it shown, if you see, it says approximately 170 feet to nearest home, but it looks like it's going to the edge of the water. And then you've got the dog park, and then you've got parking areas, so there's substantial distance still, and I'm just not sure what that distance might be. If it's double, so that would be in excess of 300.
yeah, yeah, to the building, yes, excess of 350 feet. To the parking, so we did that to not try to, we measured it to our property line, so we didn't try to, you know, overdo it on that note on there. But here we're to the nearest parking areas, it's another 50 feet for that measurement, and then to the nearest parking, and then it's another 51, you know, almost double that to the nearest building.
And on the line of sight exhibit, it did show some significant vegetation. You talked about the buffering. Where will that be exactly? Because you've got that drainage access easement. Can you plant within that?
Into the natural waterway?
Not the waterway, adjacent to that, you've got drainage and access easement location to be determined at time of DO. I don't know if that would prohibit.
Oh, yeah, that's the a maintenance easement for Lee County to reach Phillips Creek and do things if they need to do that. Yeah, we'd be allowed to plant, and it's not a substantial distance. I mean, it may be 5 or 10. I think it's 10 feet is a maintenance easement. We'll probably try to stay out of that. You know, that actually I honestly don't know that at the time of DO what they get into and allow or not allow in those some of those easements. It's not a big deal, but we can easily stay out of there if that's what they want us to do, and have plenty of room for that. So.
Well, I'm asking the question because if the concern is the folks to the south and what their experience of the project is going to be, it's important where the buffer is, because the line of sight showed some pretty dense vegetation.
Yeah.
And there will be a buffer that's planted. I'm just trying to get some.
And it will absolutely need to be within that 50-foot natural waterway. So it will be, yeah, it will be as close to the creek as we can be, and planted throughout that area. So.
And that was considering headlight shine and things of that nature for the parking areas when we looked at when you guys looked at the buffer?
Yeah, and there'll be additional plantings and things along the parking in order to hide that. But yeah, that was a big part of the consideration, was to just hide any of those negative effects.
Thank you. That was the extent of my questions for now. Thank you. Ready for staff whenever you're ready.
Would you mind if we took like maybe like a 5-minute?
Certainly.
If that's
I think
okay with
everybody
you.
can stretch their legs,
Okay.
absolutely. So we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 10:20. We're back on the record.
It's already terminated. It was a low percentage.
We need to
They need it.
begin, if everyone can please. Thank you. Yes, sir. Or something? I'm sorry? Oh, thank you. Yes, we're ready to begin with the staff presentation whenever you're ready, Beth.
Okay, thank you.
My normal call or spam.
Good morning. For the record, Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section. I've been accepted as an expert in the land development code and the Lee plan, and I wish to be accepted today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The case before you today is DCI 2023-00049. It is the Royal Palm Multifamily RPD, which stands for Residential Plan Development. The request is to rezone 19.33 acres, which is currently zoned at mobile home, which is MHC2, to a residential plan development. The proposal is to construct 391 multifamily dwelling units. This includes 136 units that are site-built, which we call bonus density units, and have private on-site amenities. The maximum height of the dwelling units is 60 feet for the multifamily and 35 feet for the parking garages, and that's in the property development regulations within the conditions, attachment C. There are 3 deviations requested. The applicant went over them thoroughly. One is from the natural waterway buffer, one is the reduction in amenity parking, and the other is the open space calculation. The property history and character of the area, the applicant went over this thoroughly. This Royal Palm Village was a mobile home community with 130 mobile homes. It was built in 1982. It was constructed and developed prior to the land development code as well as the comp plan and any state permits for South Florida Water Management District. There was a comp plan that was that's going to be effective September 7th, 2024. And what that comp plan did was it changed the future land use category from central urban to intensive development. And the reasoning behind that was to increase the dwelling units, the 22 dwelling units per acre on the site in the intensive development area. And that would allow the bonus density for the site built in the coastal high hazard. So looking at the surrounding land use categories, the intensive development is located to the north, which consists of the commercial and medical offices directly across the street. So you have the Infinity dealership, you have medical offices in this region, and then you have the access to the Lowe's that's located right here. Across the street, you have the Walmart shopping plaza with the out parcels. Central urban to the east and west consists of the multifamily and the commercial. And then the suburban to the south consisting of single-family residential homes directly abutting Phillips Creek on half-acre to 1-acre lots. It is in the coastal high hazard according to the Lee plan. So it gets confusing between the state FEMA coastal high and the land development code Lee plan coastal high. This map shows you what the Lee plan, the comp plan, shows as coastal high, and the requirements within the coastal high hazard when you're going for bonus density is to construct site built. So they have to construct those additional units on the site. Development location and timing, the applicant went over these policies in 5.1.3, 5.1.2 thoroughly. And the public facilities in 4.1.1 and 4.1.2 of the Lee Plan, all of this is in an intensive development area. It has sewer and water. It has access to bus stops, as you see kind of shadowed in here. It has the EMS and fire. This is also Lee County Sheriff's Office up in here. So it has access to all the public facilities. There were letters from the school board stating that though they don't have capacity in the school choice zone, they do have capacity overall to accommodate any families that move in here with children. So it does meet this criteria of the Lee Plan. Lakes Park Regional, Lee County Park is down Old Gladiolus Drive, as the applicant pointed out. The Lee Tran bus stops, it is kind of an expressway along there, so the stops are frequent to get people to and from work or shopping centers. Another thing I want to touch on is the housing element. So policies 135.1.9 and 160.1.3 ensures a mix of residential types of uses and designs within looking at countywide for a diverse workforce. So this looks at countywide in this region, not just the subject property. So the applicant went over this thoroughly. There are multifamily dwelling units to the west that then lead up to Gladiolus, and then you have the single family to the south, large acre lots, and then you have the mobile home community. Jamaica Bay is across the street. So you do have this diverse area for residential, but then you also have a diverse workforce. So you have the retail settings up in this area. There are medical offices. There's a larger shopping network with Target and things like that to the north, as well as to the south, some various places of employment. Looking at policy 5.1.2, this prohibits residential development areas with physical constraints or hazards, which in the Lee Plan, it gives examples of the flood, storm, or hurricane hazards. So as was mentioned, the mobile home park that had been in existence since 1980s was damaged, critically damaged. And they were individually owned condo units. And so they've been dissolved in the record. They just haven't at the property appraiser to remove the lots. So there is a condition that staff is proposing that needs to be done prior to the DO being approved, that needs to be sought through to dissolve those lots so that setbacks and things don't play a role and you don't have property lines within the multifamily units. Also, which was touched on by Ms. Fountain, when this builds back as multifamily, if it is approved, it will meet current standards in the Florida Building Code, so it will be elevated. It will be designed with the latest and greatest building codes to hurricane wind load and that type of thing. So yeah, it is a bowl right now, but when it is developed, it will be brought to current standards. Another thing I want to touch on is the applicant provided a really nice slide, and I touched on it in the staff report, what the existing conditions were along Phillips Creek. Some of those units were almost 5 to 10 feet away from the edge of water. The shoreline had some hardening in some areas when I went out to do my site visit, as well as, some docks which could not find record of being permitted, that kind of thing. So in doing this development, the setback for the actual development footprint for the parking and the multifamily units will be further set back than what was there in the past because of the 50-foot natural waterway buffer. So in the natural waterway buffer, which I'm going to touch on buffers in a little bit, you will have the plantings. You can have passive rec in there. And then we have additional conditions for water quality because of the impaired waters along there. So this is an improvement to help with mitigation towards any storm impact. If the water levels rise on Phillips, you have that forgivable space of the 50 feet with that natural waterway buffer. That's why that's in the current code today. So the master concept plan, going over that in depth. So you can see the central located lake. You have the access points coming off of Old Gladiolus Drive, and then the potential access point on US 41. There's the natural waterway buffer. The natural waterway buffer is measured from the top of bank or mean high water, whichever is further landward. That starts your 50-foot measurement. So the applicant was required to provide that, and then provided a cross-section in the open space exhibit showing how that measurement was applying, with the only pinch point with this parking down here. So the traffic, which Mr. Treese touched on, the level of service in the overall surrounding road network, it ranges from a C to an F rating with or without the proposed development. So if nothing goes in, this doesn't go forward, you still have these roads that are a C or an F rating, but with it, it would remain the same. So, you know, there still needs to be some improvements on the surrounding roads, but the project doesn't provide a detriment to that. The proposed 2 access points, which were stated on Old Gladiolus, as well as the FDOT 41. The Old Gladiolus Drive access point will be reviewed at time of development order if it needs to have any improvements off-site to support the level of development on-site. We do not do that at time of zoning, because during the development order process, that's where you have the engineer drawings, and you have everything is shown to scale at that, so you can kind of see what's going on off-site. Old Gladiolus and Gladiolus Drive leading up to Lakes Park is a signalized intersection to control the traffic flow in that region. The second access that is controlled by FDOT, Mr. Treese went over in detail about where they're at in that line. So the pre-app meeting didn't give them a feeling of this is a solid no. They went forward with the permitting stage. So in the realm of moving it, possibly it might not go where it is on the master concept plan, hence our condition in the zoning from transportation, which is condition 6A. The environmental factors, so there were no protected species on this site. The flux was not warranted on this zoning application because it was developed site. So it did not have any indigenous on the site because of the condo or the mobile home units that were on the site. The open space I want to touch on a little bit. So Phillips Creek, the applicant owns 1.6 acres within this region. So the applicant asked for a deviation to subtract the 1.16 from the overall acreage of the development and then base the open space off of that for the 40%. So the deviation that came in was a 37.5% open space requirement, which is the reduction of that 1.16, because it gets, when you start dealing with all the different percentages, it gets kind of confusing. They're providing the required open space on the upland portion at a 40% rating, 37.5% overall is what that's saying. And so that's in line with Lee Plan Policy 4.1.4 for the protected species, stormwater, water quality to enhance the site. Going through buffers, so along the right-of-ways, so you have a sliver of right-of-way right in here, and then you have the right-of-way in here. The applicant is required to provide, it's a 15-foot wide buffer, so nothing can go in there, no structures. So 15-foot wide, and in that 15-foot wide space, for every 100 feet, linear feet, there's 5 trees and a double hedgerow. So that is going to be along this area right in here. The 50-foot natural waterway buffer is located in this region right here. You are allowed to have passive recreation as long as it doesn't trip a 20% impervious. So the concrete in there doesn't trip that 20%. That's in the land development code. But in this region, every 100 feet, there will be 6 native trees and 50 native shrubs in this region right in here. I want to touch on this access point for natural resources. So in the code requires a 20-foot access. that has no vegetation in it, because they need to be able to get a vehicle in there if during a storm event this gets blocked or something and they need to go in for health safety and remove the blockage or maintain this. It also allows for the community to maintain what they own along that shoreline. So that 50-foot buffer in the land development code, you're able to overlap an easement in a buffer as long as half of the required width, so 25 feet, is outside of the easement. So the 20-foot maintenance easement is within the 50-foot, and then the applicant will be required to note that on the DO drawings, show the easement, and then show where what plantings are located. So that's 6 native trees and the 50 native shrubs working around this area. There's one pinch point right down here where the parking encroaches, which the staff granted that deviation. And then I provided the open space table from the master concept plan blown up to kind of see the layout of how the reduction works. So the surface water management, in a zoning case, the applicant is required to provide a written surface water management plan, just kind of giving the lay of the land, what is currently on site, how the water flows, and then what it's going to look like, where it's going to flow when the development goes in. And if you're using the natural features of the site, how are you using them? And so in this development, there's existing, because this was individual lots, there's existing pipes and things that are going to have to be reworked through the development order process. So those will all be brought, removed. The site will be filled. The lake is a central lake. There'll be dry detention areas that lead to the lake, attenuate the water, and there's a control structure that runs around this lake that's set per South Florida Water Management District. And then there's a slow bleed out that will lead into the Phillips Creek. Staff has provided conditions, 2 different conditions. One is to the open space deviation as well as the encroachment for that additional littoral plantings along the shoreline. That will filter the water coming off the site naturally, plus then the county staff has provided from Natural Resources water quality monitoring requirements that is to monitor Phillips Creek for the impaired water system to make sure that whatever's coming off the site isn't impairing the waters further, and they're providing the proper nutrient monitoring on it so that we don't have an uptick on the nutrient load, and that's listed in that condition as well. So the deviations we kind of went over, there's 3. The one that's being denied is number 2. I've explained that the 50-foot natural water, and I've also explained the open space that is equal or better on both of those deviations because we're providing an enhancement along that shoreline. Deviation 2, the code section recognizes that there are no golf courses. There are no large amenities being proposed. It builds that into the code. That's why this applicant has to follow that code, because it's saying that without golf courses so you need to follow this part of the land development code for the parking provided. In the deviation justification, it was mentioned that it's over parked. Well, no, because we have a requirement for your use, and then you're adding this amenity which looks at off-site parking. Like, if you're going to have people over and utilize the amenity center, what does that look like? Like, is that going to be over park? You're going to have people parking in areas. Yeah, you have guest parking, but that might not accommodate for what you're doing. So we have to look at worst case scenarios when we look at deviations. Unless there's something that is given to us that allows us to know exactly what's going to happen in that amenity center. Yes, it's built into this unit, but what's going to happen? Like, you're going to have just a weight room, and so it's all internal capture, or you're going to have, we don't even get into that because of worst case scenario. And so talking with Development Services, there was no numbers provided in the deviation request. So the thought is that when you have overflow going here and not enough parking to get to this facility, because you're going to have to start parking in the roundabouts or off-site or along Old Gladiolus. So we look at worst case scenario. So that's kind of staff's positioning and development services from that. Because that, one of the testimony was that this doesn't have a golf course. It's like, yeah, the code recognizes that. It doesn't have a golf course. This is recognizing already the internal capture plus any extra coming off site. That's why the code's written the way it is. Unless there needs to be something provided. And then, and it's mentioned in the staff report, on top of it, and granted the units are less than what's being proposed, the development order is showing the site meeting parking. And I have a copy. It's still under review. That's why it wasn't attached to the staff report. So this is just a sheet out of the development order that shows.
Thank you. That'll be staff exhibit 3. Do we have a DO number on here? Yes.
Yes, at the top in
Thank you.
red.
DOS 2024-0, is that a 1?
I believe it's,
101?
yeah, I believe so. I can look that. I can double check that.
Thank you. I got cut off, so it's not clear to see. But yes, thank you.
So during the review of this deviation, the applicant submitted a development order that it shows less units, but it does show the parking being met. So then we were like, well, is this really necessary, this deviation? So without any additional information, we cannot really entertain the deviation number 2. And we have to look at worst case scenario.
Thank you.
So when an applicant comes in and is requesting bonus density, the criteria in LDC section 2-146B must be met. The applicant described all of these really well. And the additional traffic, you want to make sure that if you're proposing this multifamily, do all the residents need to travel through a lower density area? They do not. There's an Old Gladiolus Drive, has a mix of commercial, medical office, and then the multifamily to the west. The existing and committed public facilities are not overwhelmed. No, they're not. This is an area that has all the services needed to support multifamily. There's an active bus route along a major arterial road. You have the sewer and water. Lee County Utilities has provided a letter. You do have the school system that's provided that they have capacity. You have the fire, police, and EMS in close proximity, as shown on the map. Storm shelters and other appropriate mitigation when you're in the coastal high hazard area. So this is in the coastal high hazard area. J.R. Evans provided a document for the emergency plan for the development. That is a draft that will be reviewed at time of development order with, looking at the hurricane shelter, any fees that need to be paid at that particular time. And then the resulting development will be compatible with the existing and planned surrounding land uses. It will be. You have to the west the multifamily units. The applicant has designed the master concept plan to cluster the multifamily units around the surface water management lake, with the garages at 35 feet flanking the outside along this multifamily area. And then you have Phillips Creek across from the single family that has a 50-foot natural waterway buffer. One of the things that staff included on the staff report was the plat for the single family to the south. The plat for the single family to the south shows a natural area that they are required to maintain that's roughly 20 to 25 feet on land, and that's a natural area of trees and shrubs. So that is within it, like almost like a preserve, but back in the day they called it this natural area on a plat. So that is set aside as, off-site requirement for an additional screening of the Phillips Creek. The applicant must provide a 50-foot they must provide the content of that working around. If there needs to be some adjustments to that easement, there can be adjustments to the easement as long as there's an access point to get to the water to maintain that shoreline. You need to be able to get equipment in. And right now, as it stands on the master concept plan, there is a drainage area that runs along this area right here that gives access. There's no buffer required between these two. So there is room, if need be, to come in here and go this way. And that's how staff reviewed that from that perspective. So the surrounding land uses, to the north, of course, you get into more of the intensive commercial uses, and then the Arterial Road 41 with Jamaica Bay across the street. In conclusion, through the PowerPoint presentation, staff finds that the applicant has provided a consistent LEA plan and land development code, has provided a master concept plan and supporting documents to demonstrate compliance with the LEA plan and land development code to be consistent with or compatible with the surrounding land uses as it pertains to traffic, environmentally sensitive, and then also the emergency plan for the increase in density. So with that, staff recommends approval with the conditions. On the 48-hour letter, staff is in agreement with everything but the deviation number 2 changes. So the striking of the 4 habitable floors, I just wanted to, that's why I took a break. I wanted to verify that with Development Services that they were on board with that, and they were. And I have my PowerPoint presentation for the record. And I also have a letter that was mailed to me from Ms. Whitmer. She's the association president for Parkside Place Condominium Association, which is to the west of the subject property. There's my PowerPoint. Here's the copy of that letter.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you.
It's feeling different.
It's one of those days. Thank you. Okay, so the presentation, thank you, will be staff exhibit 4. The letter will be staff exhibit 5. Okay, and you don't have to read it into the record, but was it your understanding then there's objections from the association to the west?
Yes, for traffic and flooding.
And that letter will be for staff exhibit number 5, excuse me. Okay, I asked my questions as I went along. Did applicant have any questions of the staff? Okay, thank you. Then we will begin with the public participation. If anyone came in after I administered the oath in the beginning, please indicate that so that I can be sure that you get sworn in prior to placing your statements on the record. Again, I'm going to call these in the order that I have them. So the first one I have is Thomas Estrella.
Good morning.
Sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for coming today.
First, I want to thank you because you've been asking questions that we've all been asking ourselves. So you covered a little bit, but my name is Thomas Estrella. I live at 7110 Phillips Creek, and I'd like to express my concerns on the project that is up for approval. The first thing I would like to talk about is flooding. I'm very concerned with this causing additional flooding to everyone located west, east, and south of that property. And I'm not talking about just Phillips Creek. I can see this going all the way up Willow. So I just wanted to make that known real quick. Heavy rains already flood Lost Tree Apartments directly to the west, Parkside Condos also to the west, Phillips Creek directly to the south of this proposed development also gets flooded just with heavy rains, never mind hurricanes. I couldn't find any data on the commercial properties to the east to see if the oil or gas shops there experience any flooding, but I am curious to see what that would show. If this 20-acre property is raised and is paved the way the plan currently is, my house is going to be flooded every time it rains. I would like an updated flood mitigation study done with current information rather than information pre-Hurricane Ann that includes a wider geographical scope, like all the way to Willow. Just to see what places are actually going to be affected by this. Hurricane Ann reshaped the waterways, and our community is already seeing places flood that haven't been prone to flooding before. I understand that we are a regulatory floodway, but Phillips Creek and Hendry Creek hasn't been dredged, maintained, or even trimmed back in years. None of this is being accounted for on the plan from what I could see or in the reports. So I would like that to be taken into consideration as well. Also, there's a lot of talk about the 1.16 acres being in Phillips Creek and is asking for exclusions based on that information. Since that water runoff being directed here is the plan on their property, does that mean that they're gonna include like a seawall to make sure their fill doesn't become sediment inside that, causing more flood issues? And also, would they participate in the maintenance of Phillips Creek and Hendry Creek as far as the dredging maintenance of the water and trimming back of the trees and mangroves? I also asked this because after speaking with some of the neighbors, I learned that, you know, in the last 15 years, the neglect on this creek has prevented what used to be able to go through that creek, like a 22-foot pontoon boat, can no longer go through it. Not even a jet ski can go through it, which makes me ask why they want to put a kayak drop-off there. I'm also concerned about the property values decreasing with affordable housing projects being built in the backyard and causing crime rates to go up. Now, I'm assuming what affordable housing rates are, and I don't know what that really means, and I don't know if I can actually know what that is, but I'm assuming it's affordable. I am concerned about our privacy at this, as this project will remove our ability to exclude others from our property because they will be in a high-rise looking down into our backyard, pool, and hot tub, and every window in the back of our house. They will have a direct line of sight into our private lives and private property. We can't grow 60-foot plus trees fast enough to stop this from happening. This negatively affects everyone that lives on this side of the creek in multiple ways. For an example, of quality of life. I know that their description showed that they won't be able to see in it, but that was also at a ground level. And when I'm on my deck, I'm already 8 feet high. So I don't know if that depiction actually shows what the real line of sight is. So I would like that to be taken into account too. I'm also very concerned about having a pickleball court and a dog park for 400 households right across the creek from my house because it's going to be a nuisance from the noise of the pickleball court and the noise of the dogs. I have to ask you, can you imagine if there was 400 dogs behind your house? How would you feel? I'm not opposed to that being in the plan. I would just appreciate it if it was not next to us, maybe on the side of the Infinity dealership or the commercial side where they really won't care. I also think there'll be a high potential for biohazard pollution to the creek with the dog park being located where it is. And as I just mentioned, can these things be relocated? You guys are the planners. I don't really know how it works. I'm new to all this, by the way, so. That's most of my concerns. Let me just go through what. He sent me. Are you guys aware that there's no retaining walls in that creek? On either side? You guys are? Nope, that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, actually, one more question, sorry. How many cars do they think can turn in to that 41 opening and not block the traffic? I was curious about that, because I'd like to put some money on that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir.
What's that?
The Department of Transportation will let them know what they can do.
Okay,
And they said they could relocate it.
perfect. Also, what comes from these meetings, and what should we expect moving forward, and how do we address our concerns?
So after today's meeting, the recommendation that I'll issue goes to the Board of County Commissioners, and they're the final decision maker on the case. So as I was saying, if you speak today, you can speak at that meeting with them. There's generally a time limitation, and your comments are limited at that meeting to what you said here today. So the fact that you're here and you spoke, those comments will be heard to the board before they make their decision. Once they make their decision, then it goes, if they approve it, it goes to development order stage, which they have a development order pending right now. So that is an administrative process. There isn't opportunity for public participation. So this really is your best option to ask these questions that you're asking and have potential impact on what the development might look like.
Okay, with that being said, you know, I looked at this document that was available to me with 440 pages, and I read it. I didn't understand a lot of it, and I don't think I did my proper due diligence on this. What if I learn something or have, you know, something that I wasn't able to address here that is a significant thing? Would I be able to address that later?
You would need to call the county attorney's office and just ask that question. They'll direct you to the right person, the attorney that works for the county. They represent the board, and they're the ones that determine what's appropriate and what's not appropriate to be said at the board hearing.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There was also Christy Estrella listed on your sheet.
That's why I was checking my phone. We covered all the same stuff.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. The next one I have is for Connie Massey. You didn't want to speak? Oh, okay. I call them anyway. We've had folks in the past that say that, and then they do want to speak, so I want to be sure to give everyone a chance. And we make a note. Thank you. Then I have Stacy and James Gray. No. Not to speak? Okay. Neither of you? Okay. Janet Blay?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. I am Janet Bly, and I am Secretary of the Association, plus a resident. We have owned in the park since 2000, have lived there permanently 8 or 9 years. So it's become a very close-knit community. We became family. We've been through a number of hurricanes. Unfortunately, Ian was our demise. Although our president had told us many, many times that our clubhouse is not a hurricane-approved building, there were 15 to 20 of us who decided to stay because, of course, the hurricane was going to hit Tampa. So, better judgment should have prevailed, but it didn't. So we had planned to stay, and a number of us met up at the clubhouse. And I'm sure many of you have heard harrowing stories. Actually, I was part of one. We had a gentleman in the park that had had a stroke. So it was very difficult for him and his wife to go anywhere because of his restrictions. She had brought an air mattress up to the clubhouse, and everything was going well until the perfect storm hit. And I understand with Phillips Creek, but not only was there a surge, but it was high tide. So every time we have high tide, there's always flooding, whether it be in the park or across the creek from us. It was a perfect storm. That's all I can say. So now as the water is rushing into the clubhouse at ankle and then knee deep and then thigh deep, we decided, hey, we need to get out of here. Fortunately, one of the residents that had a higher unit had stayed, and they were right across the street. And I called, and she said, definitely come over. So now we have this gentleman who is paralyzed, who can't really do anything. We did get the air mattress out, and we threw him on top of the air mattress. And as I said, we are a community that pitches in. We help each other out. And as we were taking him across, he fell off and went under the water. The water was actually chest high, almost to the neck as we were crossing. And this was just, I can't even say, maybe an hour into the perfect storm. And one of our residents went underwater, threw him over his shoulder, and carried him up 6 or 7 steps into this unit. But that's the kind of community we are. After the storm and the next day, yes, water had receded. There were a few people that had actually stayed in their homes instead of coming up to the community building. One of them actually went next door. They didn't have a key to get into the unit. It was a higher unit, and they stayed on the porch all night long through the driving rain and the cold and the wind. We got back to our unit, and the roof was peeled back like a sardine can. We had 5 feet of water in the house. Our home had shifted. You could tell whether it was from the surge of the water or from the wind. So we did meet our demise with Irma. And as I said, we had been residents since 2000. We'd been through Charlie and Wilma and Irma. And this one just completely took the park out. And I think as a resident, a lot of us just need to move forward. The homes were more than 50% damaged. I mean, I know there were 1 or 2 people that tried to stay and clean it up, but I mean, with the mold and everything else, it's just a harrowing experience, and never would I do that again. Unfortunately, you know, you think you're old enough and you learn through experience. Well, it was an experience. But I think it's just time for us to move on. We need the closure, so I'm hoping that, you know, the approval will go through. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Okay, the next card I have is for Gregory Dudek. Good morning.
Good morning. Get to my notes. Good morning. My name is Greg Dudek. I reside at 7090 Phillips Creek Court. I moved there in 2002, so I've been there just shy of 20 years. I've seen everything go on in this area from, you know, Charlie's flooding to Irma's flooding to the damages to the park and the stuff flying around. I mean, my biggest concern with this project is, number one, we never really received any notification this project was even going to go on. They say they sent a letter. It wasn't certified. I never received it. Many of the other residents never received it. And if they wanted to reach out to the guys on the south side of the creek, they would have come over. All you got to do, okay? They've been at that site 50 times.
Hold on a second, I can't hear. Please turn off your cell phone.
So they've been at that site, whatever, 20, 30, 50 times. Not one time did anybody come over and speak to any one of us about the project. And that's disheartening, right? You're gonna be a partner on a creek where when you talk on that side of the creek, it resonates over to our side. I used to love it when the residents of the park, in the wintertime, they'd all sit down there and I'd walk down and we'd chat across the canal. Great people. Hated to see what happened to them. But an 18-acre raised site to 12 feet, my house is at 11.1, which is code. Everybody on our side, that 18 acres is not holding 18 acres of water. We all know that. A little bit of water going into a 1-acre lake, you just now took all the parking, all that watershed, it's not going to that lake. We know it's going all around the project. And everybody downstream is going to feel the effect. Parkside condos, the next development next to it, all the residents in Hendry Creek itself, all the residents off Gladiolus, off of Coco Sable, everybody south will see that water. Because when it pushes up, there's 18 acres that it's not going on. It's going somewhere. And it's gotten worse and worse as every little parcel gets developed. I'm not against them selling the property. I'm against 390 units, 800 cars going in and out of that project every day because it's going to be low-income housing. That's affordable housing. That's working class people. Currently, there's 136 part-time trailer residents over there. Over 55 retired. They don't leave the house every day. They usually have one car. That traffic that's coming out of that place is going to be a nightmare for everybody. It's going on to Old Gladiolus, and it's going on to 41. And every day, 2 cars per resident, because they're going to be working class people. My other concern we started to talk about, like Thomas talked about, the pickleball court. They're putting it on the creek, 50 feet away, with lights. I heard a study, and I'm not an expert, 700 to 800 feet is normal noise level for a pickleball court. People playing pickleball, it's a social gathering. It's not a tennis match, it's a social gathering. Twice as many people play pickleball as in are on the court. A dog park with 400 residents, 50 feet away from the canal is 400 potential dogs barking every night. They get close to that creek, it resonates right across the creek to every residence around it. And I'm not just concerned about the 6 parcels, I'm concerned about the 600 in Hendry Creek. During Ian, every single vehicle that was in Hendry Creek was flooded. Okay, now granted, that was a 9.5-foot storm surge. But there was only a few residents in the entire Hendry Creek subdivision that saved their cars. Their cars. Not alone their pools or their houses or the 5 foot of water the older houses had in them. You know, this is going to put water on us. And it's going to be just from a natural rain event. 18 acres of covered 12-foot high property will push that water to the south. Because it can't go across 41 because there's a car dealership. So that there's no water flow to the east. It's all to the west and the south. Can't go to Lowe's, it can't go to Infinity. So where does the water go? It's going into that creek, and unless they can hold enough water, they'd have to have a empty 5-acre lake that was empty when the start of a storm started to hold that much water. And that's just for their 18 acres. That's my concern. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for joining us today. The next card I have are for Gio and Mary Allen. Tom Lowen.
My name is Tom Lowen. I no longer live in the Fort Myers area. All I want to express is the human aspects for the residents of that community. Yeah, they say mobile homes, but they were actually manufactured homes. When you say mobile home, you get visions of a single wide with wheels underneath. There was nothing like that. Half of the homes in there, the people that owned the property were not covered by their insurance. If you have hurricane insurance, it only pays you as if there's a wind damage. Many of the homes in there were not physically damaged other than the flood water. The flood water come up, and that's why the homes were no longer able to be used. They've lost everything. In my case, we had significant wind damage to the house, so I was compensated for that, not to the value of the home, but you know, I got something out of it. Well, I guess, you know, now I had to buy a home. That was our home down there. Never got enough money back. Now I've got a $1,500 house payment, which I never had in the past because I used my retirement savings to buy the home outright. So that's it. It's just the human aspects of it. I sympathize with the folks that live around here, but there's got to be some sympathy for us. We were all, you know, there's 132 homes in there. We were all of our homes were completely destroyed. So that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. James and Robin Campbell. Good morning.
Good morning. At the risk of sounding redundant, I'm going to touch on a few subjects that our fellow residents have already touched on, but I want to make sure that I have the ability to, if this goes forward, to be able to readdress those at the next meeting. So please bear with me if I sound a little redundant. So, good morning. My husband, James, and I reside at 7070 Phillips Creek Court. We want to thank both the applicants and the county for their presentations this morning, and we appreciate all of the information and the clarity that we received today. But we would like you to know that we did not receive an invitation to the informational session that was hosted at Bahama Breeze, as noted on page 50 in the report. Had we received the invitation, we would have attended. This project is very important to us as it affects not only us, but our larger community. Hurricane Ian devastated our area, the Lee County residents and the residents of Royal Palms and all of those surrounding areas. Our thoughts are with them as they remain in a state of awaiting the sale of the property and for final resolution so that they are able to finally move forward. We appreciate and understand that this project may be beneficial to all of them so that they can heal and move forward. And this project may benefit the community, the larger community. However, we do have concerns regarding the proposed plans for the development. First and foremost, flooding during Hurricane Ian, the debris from the homes of Royal Palms and surrounding areas ended up in the creek. So what we are now doing is we are experiencing flooding on a normal rain, not even a storm, just rains and high tides that are due to a lot of the things still now have settled into the creek. Things are still floating in and floating out, and we try to hook them from the dock to just remove them from the creek. We are concerned about the runoff and the water that will be coming into the creek for any storms, especially now with the information that I received this morning about building up. I'm even more concerned about that. We are concerned about the residents of Hendry Creek, the residents of Phillips Creek, and the surrounding areas. the other condos and the apartments that are to the west of Royal Palms. I am uncertain whether or not the retention pond that is proposed will be able to handle the water, and I really appreciate the thoughts put into making sure that the water meets certain levels, since so that when it goes into the creek, that it doesn't contaminate the creek. I don't think that our creek can handle the volume of water that will be put into the creek. It will not be able to handle that, and we are all at risk of flooding. Homeowners insurance, flood insurance, we lost our flood insurance and we didn't have a claim. And so all of these things we may be impacted by future flooding. If this plan is approved, will the developments and their owner properties be held responsible for ongoing maintenance? So, for example, if the developers sell to someone else, do all of if this is approved, will the requirements be carried forward? So if they have to maintain the levels of water past 2028 and things like that, like if it's purchased by someone else, are they grandfathered in to being responsible for those things, or are we going to be left behind saying, oh, well, that happened, 10 years ago, those owners are no longer here, so we don't have to take care of that. So the ongoing maintenance is an issue for us, and the management of how those said things would be taken care of are a concern to us. Also, there was a lot of talk about different things happening with the plans. We don't know, is this going to be 3-story, is this going to be 4-story, is this going to be 5-story? I thought it was a 4-story building until today. The sight lines that I looked at were based, my opinions and our opinions were based on what we were given in that report. So today, hearing that it may be something different, when do we actually know what is proposed? Because how can we make an educated decision if we don't actually know what's going to be built? Another aspect and concern we have is about the quality of life for the community with regards to the amenities that are listed in the proposal. The current medical research has been indicating that the constant exposure to the noise from the pickleball courts may lead to negative impacts on one's health, and that they are recommending that a 500 to 700 foot minimum be in place for exposure to those noise levels. The lights that may or may not impact us, again, this is a concern that I have because it all looks great on paper, and many of my fears have been allayed. However, that's what sounds here. Like, what's actually going to happen? And if it doesn't happen the way it's presented, what's our recourse? I want to know if I have lights in my backyard, what do I do? Who can I go to? I want to know after the first storm, when we have flooding, who do I go to? Who's responsible? Because I don't want to hear it's my responsibility, because I did not sign up for that. Traffic, I know we're an F. If it doesn't say we're an F, we're an F. Our traffic rating, Florida's an F. We moved here in 2022. Traffic everywhere, I think, is an F. So the traffic impact, it is worrisome. I take my life in my own hands when I ride my bike. I ride my bike with my husband to Lakes Park, going down Old Gladiolus. I believe that the applicants mentioned they would love to see sidewalks, and bike lanes. And with that traffic increase there on Old Gladiolus, nothing is moving through there. There's hardly any traffic. But with the current plan in place, we would definitely need some infrastructure there and some sidewalks and things like that to ensure that our safety when riding bikes, walking, families, and such, so that way we can be as safe as possible. Again, I'm not saying I don't like pickleball. Dog parks, all of these amenities. There was also mentioned somewhere about a car wash that was going to be on site. Not concerned about having them on site. I'm concerned about where they are located on these plans. With the noise, with the byproducts from the animals, the noise from the animals, as well as what is going to happen with the proposed car wash. And that, I believe, was originally put into one of the areas that was at the deviation where it was closest to our community, down in the southeastern end of the property. So at the very, very closest part and the cinch in there, that's where I saw a car wash. So I'm worried about that as well. So basically, those are my concerns, and I think I've talked about a bunch of the same concerns that we share. And I hope we can come together as a team and figure out what is best for our community. And obviously, would love to have this property developed in a way that would benefit the community, but also protect those that are already there. So from flooding, and so that it's a place that we can all live together. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
James Campbell was also on that sheet that he.
I spoke for him.
Okay, thank you. Smart man. Tim Kendall is the next one I have. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. My name is Tim Kendall. I reside at 15291 Willow Lane, which doesn't show up much on the maps because I'm covered by trees. But I'm going to be at that part where it's closest to the development. I've got pictures showing where they say the closest house was X amount of feet, but that wouldn't be my house. That's going to be the ones in Phillips Creek. Mine is literally about 170 feet from the buffer zone. So that's going to be me in that, get right there. And I'm going to be the anomaly in here because I'm kind of on a peninsula. I'm surrounded on three sides by water. The lagoon comes in the front yard. I've lived there since 2002. Never had any issues with flooding until recently. Obviously, Ian did us in as well. I had 5 feet of water in the house and a fire the next day. Still rebuilding today. The anomaly part is sympathy for everybody across the canal because my mother was over there. So I kind of have stuff on both sides. She's been with me for the last 2 years because obviously nothing has happened and she can't move on, and it's kind of hard at 76, retired with nothing to show for it. And I own that property with her as well, so I have my name on both sides of the canal. Obviously the number one concern is still going to be the flooding. I have pictures of what's happening now just after a normal rain. The flow going through Hendry Creek, as we all said it, I don't know the last time that the county's ever been in there to do any kind of cleanup or dredging. We contemplated trying to get everybody together to do it ourselves, and to no avail. After about 2 or 3 years, it just never happened. So since the storms, if the flow isn't already there, it has nowhere to go. A normal rain comes within 10 feet of my house now. And it was never a problem before. So flooding still being the number one issue. I was the one that had that 22-foot pontoon in the front yard when I moved in because it was direct access, and now you can't get past anywhere. So I can't imagine even for wildlife. I mean, we used to get manatees and stuff in the canal, but I don't know that there's going to be a flow for even wildlife to pass through there because there's some areas that are very, very shallow. It just seems like trying to put stuff in and not knowing what was there before all of this, because everything is pre-Ian. But even pre-Ian, we still had the problem with stuff still filling in, but nothing's been maintained or dredged. So that's kind of an issue of adding to an existing problem. Again, none of us have a problem with sports. Pickleball, don't want to be redundant, but it's easy to get on the keyboard and very easily find out all the issues with it. And again, the only issue was being that of all the area that you have, you're deciding to put it closest to the residential areas. Can it be placed further to the roads, further to commercial buildings where it won't matter as much? Everybody still deserves to have a little fun in life, so. Dog park issue, if I just take it a step further just from noise, I did have a dog that got attacked by a gator about 6 years ago. She survived it, but she did get, somehow she got out. She had 10 puncture wounds around her, but somehow got away. But there are gators in there, as all waterways in Southwest Florida will have. The concern is, and it's not even for our side, it's for those residents going into development, if you're putting a dog park that close to the water, alligators have a keen sense of smell. They're going to see little dogs as food. Just the dog, feces and urine, it's going to drain into that canal, even just from a rain, is going to attract more gators. If the buffer goes all the way across, which you're going to have a kayak spot to put in and out, is just going to give access for an alligator to access the land at that point. So there's just a few concerns that you're just going to be inviting those residents to kind of frequent a dangerous facility. The usual with everything else, the lights, the noise. So like I said, it's not like I've kind of got my hands in both sides of it because I'd love for my mother to be able to move on. So it's not that I'm trying to take anything away from you guys. But it's also looking at 2 years later, I'm still rebuilding and I'm getting water within 10 feet within the last year. I've got pictures from 2 weeks ago. That's driveways are covered under 1.5 feet of water. So still just flooding is going to be an issue. And if it's got nowhere to go because it's already being restricted, we've got to kind of go and see what do we have to do to mitigate that. That was pretty much most of it. I said my mother was at 15490 Meadow Circle, which is number 12. So she's on that commercial side of it. But just trying to, like I said, it's kind of closure for them. But obviously, I don't want to have to go through and redo my entire house again anytime soon because I'm still doing it 2 years later. So appreciate your time and appreciate everybody listening. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. I have Sheila Snow. I'm not going to speak. Okay. Zachary Schenkel. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Zach Schenkel. I live at 7130 Phillips Creek Court, where I have resided since January of 2004, so a little over 20 years. As aforementioned by my neighbors, the flooding situation has gotten progressively worse. Starting the first year I lived there with Charlie, we started to notice some, but recently in the past couple of years, just with a heavy rain or even a high tide, we're starting to get flooding. My house is the oldest house built on Phillips Creek Court. It was the first one built there. I do not live directly across from where the trailer park was. I live a little bit further south. So if you were to show the plot lines, this is my house here. So I don't necessarily see that from my property. Now, currently, right? So maybe from my second floor, and per Tom Australia's discussion about the line of sight, we do have like Sheila Snow Martineau, my next door neighbor, and Tom is my other next door neighbor on the other side. We live in 2-story houses. So that was that line of sight done to 1-story houses because our houses are 2 stories, right? So the other ones further down are single stories, but we are 2 stories. So I don't know what the line of sight, was calculated on a 1-story house or not. So I'm very concerned about the flooding. I brought some pictures, which I will give you, that show flooding in the backyards where the water has literally come up almost to our homes recently. These were taken in June of this year. There was not a storm or anything. And then there's an empty lot still on our street, which never used to have water in it. Now during a storm, it fills up like a lake. And that water's coming from someplace, right? So I have those. And then also to the point that was just made by Tim about alligators, this is a picture from the Campbell's backyard where an alligator got up on their dock. So this is showing that there are definitely alligators in there. I personally have never seen one, but down my way, there's not as much room for them, so they may not come there. But there is a lot of other wildlife there. So I appreciate that you did a site visit. I was very happy to hear that you did that. I don't know if you came on our street or not. Okay, so you understand our street is a very sort of bucolic, very country-like atmosphere. Everyone lives on large lots. It's very quiet. It's dark at night. It's a very peaceful neighborhood, and it always was. We were great neighbors with the folks at Royal Palms. I mean, they were, first of all, it was a 55 and over community, a lot of seasonal residents. But we had gotten together with them and our neighbors to try and get dredging done, as Tim mentioned. So we were trying to work together because we recognized that these problems existed and were, getting worse, and the county wasn't doing anything about them. But now when we're talking about a very large residential complex with a lot of pavement, so the 132 mobile homes that were there all had yards, someplace where it wasn't all paved over, right? Now we're talking about large buildings, big roofs, lots of runoff onto a lot of concrete or asphalt, right? No place for the water to absorb in. And I appreciate the conversation today because I didn't understand, and I still don't have a full understanding of the how that retention pond is going to work. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily large enough considering how much water we're talking about. And we're concerned, obviously, that there's going to be surface runoff that's going to go right into the creek.
Can you slow down?
Oh, so sorry, ma'am. Surface runoff going into the creek without being put into the retention pond. So we're concerned, obviously, about that. And of course, the flooding is the biggest concern for me. The other things that have been mentioned I'd like to bring up also is the traffic. So I actually walk to Lakes Park on a regular basis. I will go out onto 41, I get on the sidewalk, I walk down to Old Gladiolus. There's a pass through for pedestrians and bicycles, and I go down Old Gladiolus Road. It is kind of treacherous, particularly when you get down by Lowe's. There are the trucks coming in and out of Lowe's to deliver, the delivery trucks. You also have the trucks delivering the cars to the Infinity dealership. And then there's traffic. And believe me, and I might be guilty of having done this in the past, cutting through there to pass through the back of Lowe's to get on 41 and bypass all the traffic, in the front of Lowe's, right? So I was happy to hear that it was going to be a gated community, because if you have that access point, it's just going to be a nonstop traffic down Old Gladiolus. So I would love to see Old Gladiolus, as Robin Campbell mentioned, maybe have sidewalks all the way to the end so it is a safe place. You're proposing that these residents will use Lakes Park, which I hope they will, because it's great resources right nearby. I go myself all the time. You need to make it safe for them to get there, right? So and you anticipate they're going to walk, which I would, because you don't have to pay to park and you live close enough, and exercise is certainly good for all of us. But it needs to be safer, and it's a pretty narrow road for the trucks that go up and down there today. And when people walk or ride their bikes, it is very hazardous right now, and you have to be super careful. And I don't even walk with headphones because I'm afraid of a car, and I walk facing the traffic, and I've still been almost hit numerous times during broad daylight, right? So concerned obviously about the traffic mitigation and the safety for the residents, not just myself, but the people that would live in whatever development goes in there. And the other thing is just pollution overall, noise pollution, light pollution. I'm very concerned about, when they built the Mercedes-Benz dealership and the BMW dealership, which are across 41, so they're, over here, right there. And they keep the lights on those parking lots all the time. Now, I can't necessarily see those lights per se, but you see the glow of them, right? From my house anyway. I can't imagine how much light pollution is going to fill the neighborhood, because in Royal Palm Village, I think that was the name, sorry, the mobile home park, they didn't have big lights. There wasn't, it wasn't lit up like a Christmas tree, right? It was quiet little sort of country setting. Now you're talking about a big development. They're going to want to put a lot of lights in, and there's going to be light pollution. And I understand, I read in the report, I read all 400 and whatever pages the best I could, but as Tom mentioned, I'm not an expert and I don't understand everything. I did see something about down-facing lights or something like that, but there's nothing about how high those lights are going to be for the parking lot. The buildings are going to be high. There's going to be lights on the outside of the buildings, obviously, those kind of things. So I'm concerned about, light pollution, noise pollution, which people have already mentioned, pickleball court in particular, because they're quite noisy. My next door neighbors are very avid pickleball fans, and they're concerned about it, and they love pickleball, right? So that tells you something right there. And then just water, water pollution, obviously, too. So it is very different. One other thing that we don't understand, and I couldn't find it in the report, so if I missed it, someone please correct me. We understand it's a proposal for 391 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom sizes, but we don't know how many of each. So when all this traffic and parking was mapped out, what was it based on? How many bedrooms are we talking about overall? Because the number of bedrooms is going to affect the number of cars, typically, right? Like, I had to have my septic tank replaced, my whole septic system, and we're all on septic on our side, by the way, after the storm. And I found out that it's based on not the number of bathrooms you have. They said you could add 5 more bathrooms to your house if you want and keep the same septic system. But if you add more bedrooms, you have to get more. So clearly, I know this is going to be on public sewer, so that's not what I'm talking about. It's just the number of bedrooms affects the number of people they anticipate to live in a property. That's what the county told me when I got my new septic tank. So I'm just wondering how many actual bedrooms are we talking about in these 391 units? Because that would, to me, would figure into the traffic calculations, the number of cars that need parking, and obviously the in and out traffic, you know, and also probably the number of students going to the schools. I don't have children, so I don't know much about that, but the number of students going to the school, if you have 3-bedroom apartments, you'll likely have more school-age kids than if you have more one-bedroom apartments, which is going to be, you know, single or couples with no children typically, or no school-age children for sure. So just concerned about, you know, what is that real density? Because I don't understand. 391 units is one thing, but I don't know how big each one of those is going to be and what that's going to look like from an overall perspective of the quality of life. And that's what we're concerned about, flooding, and the quality of our life from our tranquil neighborhood that we have today being transformed into something that feels like we're in the middle of an urban center. And that's pretty much my concerns. So would you like my photos?
Please,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, do those have dates on them, if I may ask?
We could get them. I don't have them printed on
Okay.
here. But, well,
Yeah,
they're
because
also
there
June.
wasn't a state of emergency for Invest 91 that came through, so it is a storm event that came through. I was just asking, I have the emergency order that was given out for the executive order. So I just want to make sure we're not talking about a regular rainfall or if we're actually talking about a storm event. So it's okay. I just wanted to make sure I got the dates on that. Thank you.
We'll find out. I don't know, but I can find out. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The next card I have is for Rod Pickett. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for this opportunity. The stenographer is stressed. I will be brief. I represent the seller of this property as trustee. And as you have heard, we are a senior community, 55 plus. We have been in place for nearly 50 years with an aged infrastructure. The water delivery system is constructed of irrigation piping. And we simply do not have the resources for the restorative efforts required to make this property viable. So out of our 132 residents, we have roughly 30% that are full-time, mostly fixed income Social Security, and are still struggling and striving to find economic resources and means to move forward. Your approval of this project will give them some relief for their financial needs to move forward and get life and get housing. So we encourage your support of this project for those seniors because they are desperate for housing. All right? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Next card I have is for Stanley Walters and Barbara Stevens.
He
Not
just
speaking.
said what I meant to say.
Okay, Eric Farmer. Good morning.
Good morning. Again, my name is Eric Farmer. I currently live now in North Fort Myers area, but I was a resident of the park. It was a community we all loved, we all got along well. We had great respect for our neighbors behind us, and we feel for their concerns of rising water. And again, we all tried to get together and find ways to dredge the canal. That's really not an issue here concerning this project as I see it. That is something that the county definitely needs to address, and we've tried to get them to do that in the past. I'm hoping that you will support this positively, as our neighbors will also agree, because this gives us an opportunity to move into the future of Fort Myers and of Lee County. it also presents a great opportunity for those of us who lost everything. The only thing I didn't lose was my wife's life and mine. I'm now back to work full-time. I went 5 different places to live in a year and a half before I could find a place to permanently live as a result of Ian. Ian devastated a lot of people, my neighbors included. I urge you to support this so that we can have a phoenix rise up from the waste. Thank you.
The last card that I have is for Don and Kathy Goddard. They left, okay. Was there anybody else that did not submit a form yet that wanted to speak today? Okay. We're going to take a break before we come back for rebuttal. How much time would the parties like to convene?
10 minutes.
Oh, you mean for
Wait,
the...
for the break or the rebuttal?
Come back for the break.
Oh, I think, what, 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes would fine.
Okay, it's 11:43, so we'll just make it an even noon and come back at 12 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, we're back on the record. We're beginning the rebuttal with the applicant whenever you're ready.
All right, try to go through these as much as we can one by one. Some of them we can affect, some of them we just, is Lee County and other policies that we can't affect, but we'll do our best to at least answer them and help this along. So let me get down. So a couple of things. You know, we heard a lot about the noise concerns for the dog park and the pickleball. So one thing is that we're willing to go on record and say that neither one of those will be lighted. So, and we're willing to put dusk to dawn closure of those. So they'll just be open from dawn until dusk, you know, till sunset. So we're okay with those hour limitations on both of those, but and it not being lighted will take care of a lot of that anyway, but we're willing to say that as well. So we'll have some limitations on that. We aren't considering moving those, and here's why. I mean, that area, what we tried to do and design the site was to move the buildings as far away from other residents as possible to improve that line of sight. And from the one gentleman that said that, you know, from a 4 or 5 story building or whatever could look into their house. I mean, that was part of our reason for the design, and we knew there had to be a natural waterway buffer. We knew the green space more near Phillips Creek was better. So we did that, but in order to compensate, I guess, for that, for the possibilities of the noise, we understand that, then we'll at least limit the hours and not light it so people won't be wanting to use it at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Of course, there's the noise ordinance as well that we would have to comply with. That doesn't, I think the hours of operation of that limits help better than the noise ordinance, because this noise ordinance really doesn't, you know, downgrade that site till 10 p.m., which isn't really helpful. But I will note that the noise ordinances apply to a higher standard to multifamily developments than they do single-family developments by 10 or so decibels for every step, you know, during the day and at night. So multifamily developments are set to a higher standard than single-family. So, but we're not going to rely on that. We're going to rely on this as far as our conditions. The garbage compact that was, I think they saw the one on there, there was a facility in the one corner that was close to the dog park. That is not a garbage compactor. It's more of a, I think that's lift station or something like that. So it is not a garbage compactor. That is moved up to the front. So the garbage compactor area that would be noisy is up here in the front. And this area back here is just a utility area that would be, you know, actually for the utility connections and stuff like that. So it's a quiet operation. So the compactor and any of the noise like that is up in the front.
There's that wash area that's noted next to the dog park. What is that?
Yeah, that was a wash area for if you want a car to wash up your cars. Yeah, for people to maintain their cars.
Car wash that's going to be.
Oh, no. The car wash that I did mention was the one that was already existing off-site. This is just for residents to be able to use to wash their car. It would be appreciated for me. I lived in an apartment for years, and I mean the only option was going to a car wash. So to have something a little bit for those people that like to maintain their own car, that's what that's for. So the, let's see, so, and this I think I don't know if it's good to know about affordable housing and what that really means for this or not. I mean, I think it can be disheartening for some people. I think it's be interesting for the people to know what this really requires. So under the Florida Housing and Finance Corporation, they set the standards based on median income of an area for what is able to be charged for rent, or what the limits are for rent for household incomes that are at medium or below by certain percentages or above by certain percentages. So the affordable units in this case will have to qualify according to Lee County. Each household that would apply would have to be at 140% of median income or below. And then based on that, there's a maximum amount of rent that is able to be applied to this. This is not going to be low income housing. Some people would probably love to see some of that for more of the affordable workforce housing. You can judge for yourself whether you think these numbers actually meet that or not, but these are the requirements that it'll be under. For a 2-bedroom unit, the medium household, the 140% household income to qualify for that would be a minimum would be a maximum of $104,000 a year for the household. It's a rent of between 23 up 2,500. It's even higher. It's up to 117,000 for a 3-bedroom unit. I mean, these people making a pretty decent living doing this. So this is not low income housing. The Lee County requirement for this is 140% of AMI or below. And that's based on an average median income of a little over $88,000 for Lee County as of 2024. So I think for me that's more than I pay for my current mortgage. So that's a lot for rent. So this is good working people that are paying a fair amount to live there. And because of that, the vision of Flournoy and what they want to put out there, I mean, we've done the visioning for them, what this product's going to be. I mean, this is a very nice development that is going to happen. The majority of people will probably be paying well above that, and this is going to be a very nice amenitized place that is going to look really good. And speaking of that, the amenity place, when we were here, that question, we never got back to that. Very common for parts of their development. The clubhouse is going to be attached to that 90-unit building, and all the people in there will have corridors, hallways that they will walk directly down and to get to the amenity center for that. So, as far as parking and traffic and all those kind of things, I mean, this is a whole unit that will do nothing else but walk down to their workout center and their amenity center. But I know that question wasn't answered earlier. We are proposing a maximum of a four-story unit. I mean, as far as the development order, so we're fine with reducing that condition to a 4-story. That's fine with us. So we want to be able to put, because this is going to be a nice development, we want to have substantially high ceilings in the different units and stuff like that. So we're not really changing the height of that, but there will only be 4 living units on that, and it'll most likely be a fair amount below the 60 feet. But so we're willing to say 4 stories, 60 feet.
Was there any consideration to tier the heights so that the buildings that were closest to the neighboring residents might be like at the 3-story range, and then put the higher buildings closer to the commercial uses to the north?
Yeah, there wasn't, mostly because we reduced everything down to the 4 stories in the first place. So, and to do that, and the economies of scale when you start to go to those extra stories above 4 really start to change that development. So we reduced the entire thing down to 4 and made the request work by that. So no, not additional tiering. And part of it is because we tried to push everything as much as we could north anyway, away from the houses. So yeah, so no, we're not further considering that, unfortunately. Let's see, the lighting, I get that, but you know, and I don't know how familiar people are with really the commercial lighting standards that are required of this, but they are the lighting. There will be parking lot lighting, but it is all required to be shielded, downlit, to not bleed over more than 0.3 foot candles from the property line. So by the time it reaches there, I mean, there will be some ambient light from that, like there is from other places, and I agree that's probably more than was existing with the manufactured home park. But it is very well controlled by the Lee County ordinance for downlighting and for the dark skies ordinance. So we'll fully comply with that to the best we can, and have even on the buildings, the downlighting on the buildings is not put up on the 4th story, so it's shining over everything. It's put on a lower level, and those are part of the requirements of Lee County as well. Let's see, I'm not going to address flooding, and we'll get to that just in a minute. Oh yes, a lot of mention about sidewalks on Gladiolas. Man, that would be great. So that's what we have to defer to Lee County to that, because we will be required to build a sidewalk in front of ours, but the other developments were built prior to that requirement. And so I believe, it's my vague understanding that at some point in the future, Lee County is planning on making that connection, but I don't know the details of that at all. So that would be amazing. I agree that's not, it's not safe the way it is to, you know, go down the center of the, you know, on the side of the street to get to Lakes Park. So that connection, I think, would be a vital future connection I'd love to see Lee County do. But we'll do our part. And then the number of bedrooms was mentioned. That, as far as traffic, that's kind of baked into the traffic counts. 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. There's a standard mix they use within there. But for this development, we will have 10% or less of the units will be 3-bedroom. So 90% of the units will either be 1 or 2, probably the majority of those being 2-bedroom units. So it's probably the large family concern is probably not as much. That's probably not going to be who's living here in the 2-bedroom as much as, so let's see, one or two other things. Stacking off 41, I agree that could be a concern. You brought that up yourself. Again, between FDOT and Lee County DOT, we will meet all the stacking requirements that we need to meet for any gated community that's on any major roadway. The standards work for that, and we will meet the standards that are required. And during our development order process, that'll be ferreted out. So FDOT is not going to let us have an access that we're all of a sudden going to cause backing up onto US 41 for. So we'll adhere to those requirements for that. All right, last thing is really we want to just hit on, no, there was the line. Let me look at the line of sight here. So just to let them know, the one gentleman said he has a 2-story house, and did we take the line of sight from there? We did not. What we did was take a person standing at the edge of their backyard and looking towards the buildings. So, you know, in some of on the aerials, you can see that. So we took it from a person standing here and standing here. So the actual house is another, well, if this is our natural, 50, 75, I don't know, 75 feet more, whatever at that distance, another 50 feet to their actual house. So we could probably run a line of sight like that, but the distance would be even greater, and we think we're pretty substantial distance away from the building. So we did our best that we could on that. But that's how we measure that line of sight. And with that, and with the one less story, with the plantings that are required here, as Beth mentioned, the natural area that's required on this side as well. I think it's hidden pretty well for this being a higher density development against single family neighborhoods. We've seen much worse than this happen. So I think this is a positive way that this is coming out. Like I said, we did as well as we could on this one. But that was, I think, trying to address that, not trying to refute it, but just trying to let them know how we did that and what that exhibit actually tries to show.
But to clarify, that's showing 5 stories, and you're reducing it now to 4. So essentially, on each, you would see essentially the top floor
Yeah, I think you'd see the
What would
top, I
become
think you
the
could see the top floor, yeah. From, if you were standing at the edge of, as close as their property line went to the creek, if they were back at their house, it'd be a little bit less, depending on the vegetation, but yes. Yep, that's correct. Yeah, there were some other things about the Phillips Creek and everything like that. We'd love to see the dredging and everything take place and the long-term maintenance of that. I mean, obviously that helps everybody in the region with flooding, and it sounds like a lot of the flooding is down creek are, you know, maybe part of that is part of the issue. I don't know if this site, I don't think this site, and that's what expert will say, is based on this site, the way it is now, there's quite a contribution with a bowl with a flat surface runoff with no water control whatsoever on the site now. So in a lot of ways, I mean, to meet the modern standards of water control, we'll have to substantially change that, that sheet flow and everything that's happening now. And based on requirements that we have, they're quite stringent, and we have to meet all those for this type of development. So I'll let Elizabeth get into that. But unless you had other questions, I'll be done.
The only other question was about the watercraft launch. My understanding
No.
from the master concept plan, that's not for motorized vehicles.
No, we just thought it'd be a nice, maybe if somebody wanted to kayak or canoe on the creek a little bit. But I mean, if it isn't
And you'll meet
navigable,
standards for whatever
yeah,
that is.
we do have standards for that. But I mean, if it isn't navigable because of the lack of dredging or whatever, then nobody would end up using it very well. But that's, yeah, no motorized at all. Mostly probably going to be used as a viewing deck for people to just go sit there by the water.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, Elizabeth.
Hello again, Elizabeth Fountain, for the record. So I echo the concerns of the individuals that came up and expressed their concerns with the current situation in Phillips Creek and Hendry Creek downstream. It is a natural waterway system, and that's what makes Lee County unique compared to other places like Collier County where Collier County's got more engineered conveyances to help, get rid of, transfer the water during those high storm events quicker and easier. Lee County has lots of natural waterways that are limited on their capacity, and then once you start getting debris in there, it can cause issues. So it definitely would like to echo those concerns, and hopefully Lee County can come up with a plan to address that issue. For this particular site, as Fred mentioned, the existing conditions, there is no water management system currently in place. So the rainfall hits the property. There may be some small depression areas that will hold some water that you witnessed and I've witnessed on the property. But for the most part, there's no control mechanism. So as soon as that water gets to a certain level, it will just sheet flow off towards Phillips Creek. The proposed development plan does include a controlled water management system. And it's deceiving when you look at the plan. The proposed lake is centralized, and in the parking areas and even within the green spaces, there's going to be a collection system. There's a collection system designed, with grade inlets and culverts that are all interconnected, and they will take the runoff water to dry detention areas and then eventually to the lake. And those dry detention areas they're a small, shallower pond that provides additional water quality treatment. We call it pre-treatment before it goes into the lake for the additional treatment and storage attenuation. The lake level is, it's based on a normal, what we call control elevation or seasonal high water elevation for the property, which is being directly adjacent to Phillips Creek. It's going to be based on the mean high water level for that creek. And the banks are, on the sides of the pond are up at least 5 to 7 feet higher than the elevation of the water. So that's how much storage is in that pond. So it's really hard to tell on a flat plan view. But there is a significant amount of storage in that pond. And the way it gets to Phillips Creek is through a control structure, which is a concrete structure that's been designed with minimum sized openings to allow water to discharge. And only at a certain elevation, the water has to get to a certain elevation before it's even allowed to go into Phillips Creek. And then that opening is sized to only let out a limited amount of water over time. And that's all being permitted through the Water Management District, and then Lee County will also be involved with that process as well through the development order. So in addition to flooding control, I think it's an improvement based on the current conditions of the site, and more so it's an improvement to the water quality treatment, and it will improve the water, the quality of that water getting to Phillips Creek, along with the required monitoring program that will be in place for the creek itself, post development. I think it's a benefit to the area.
And the benefit, I believe staff said, of the 50-foot waterway buffer, that's also intended to capture if there is any volume exceedances of the creek, that would hold that on this site as well.
Yeah, that's all will be part of the bank system and overbank area of the creek. And again, I believe we're putting in some additional plantings to help provide some additional treatment within the creek itself. But that area will be graded to be able to, it'll be lower in elevation to be able to handle any rise in water for the creek itself.
Thank you.
Yep.
Were there any other rebuttal witnesses for the applicant? Is the staff prepared to proceed? Did you have any comments or no?
I just have one comment that I like to talk about, the paddlecraft and that area that's been mentioned. So I wanted to add that Royal Palm, as it sits today, had a permit issued for the passive paddlecraft launch. So there is permitted along the shoreline an area to launch a kayak. So what the current application is showing is an area to allow for either an observation deck and the paddlecraft launch. This is a natural waterway. So there was a mention of a seawall and retaining. Code does not allow that in this area. So there will be no seawall along this area. It's all natural as part of the natural waterway buffer. So when the applicant comes in, they'll be required to get a separate permit for this observation deck to meet the height that's required compared to the depth of Phillips Creek. Phillips Creek is not deep enough to have motorcraft on there because it doesn't have enough for the draft of the boats. So that is considered the natural waterway. That's why I mentioned in my testimony that out in the field now, you have some hardening that's been happening with riprap and things that will be removed, and then this will be restored. So I just wanted to, add that into the record about that shoreline.
And can you just say, there was a question about the conditions continuing if there's a change of ownership?
Oh, yes. So if the hearing examiner recommends approval of the application and it goes to the Board of County Commissioners and it gets approved at the board, the document, the zoning resolution, follows the land. So it doesn't follow ownership. So let's say that this developer decides to sell to a new developer and they come in, and that developer that purchased, they want to do a whole new design. The process starts over again. So they would have to come in and amend whatever was approved and then provide a new master concept plan, meeting the land development code in the comprehensive plan, just like this current applicant has done, to show the changes. And at that time, the public will have access to be able to comment on that new design.
And there was a question about if any of the conditions, if it moves forward, they're violated, if there's recourse, who they would call. Is that something that Lee County Code Enforcement handles?
Yes, the Code Enforcement Department would handle upholding the zoning approval conditions and as it pertains to the development order as well. So the development order is the engineering and the landscape drawings that get reviewed after all the zoning is approved. And so the development order will have the engineer drawings, the landscape plans. Those plans must meet all conditions that were approved in this zoning case. So if something is not kept up, the water quality monitoring, the natural waterway buffer, all of a sudden lights appear around the pickleball court and there's an issue, that's when a neighbor can call code enforcement and then they'll go out and proceed.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so there were the conditions then, it sounds like, that were being offered by the applicant. Can you provide those to me in a written format, just so I can be sure that everything is captured the way? And we can, it doesn't need to be anything long. It doesn't sound like staff would object to anything of that nature. Maybe by end of business tomorrow, if you could, if that's sufficient time to do that. It sounds pretty straightforward, but the reduction of height and the dog park and pickleball court limitations that you discussed. I also would be inclined, I think, just because there is this concern about the pass-through traffic, just to ensure that it's gated, because there aren't gates that are shown on the master concept plan. So if there's no objection to that, I'd like to memorialize that in some fashion. And to everybody else that's still here, again, thank you for coming today. If you filled out the card, as I said, you will receive a copy of my recommendation once it's released, as well as the hearing date of when it will go to the board. I do have a few cases ahead of this one that I'm working on, and we take them in the order we receive them. So it will be a little bit of time before that comes into your inbox or your mailing address, whatever you provided. But thank you, everyone, for coming today. I appreciate your time, and I hope everyone stays safe and stays well. Thank you.
Thank you.